Mary, there have been horses on 61 though,
Yeah?
down by Temperance.
Oh, there's some people that have horses on the train road.
They've made it down, looking for greener pastures.
I know several horses.
Then we had the year there was the call-in for the llamas on 7.
What?
Wildlife. Yes.
We'll call Cook County Board of Commissioners meeting Tuesday, January 28th to order. And would you join me in stating the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Taking a look at the agenda, do we have any adjustments that anyone has?
Mr. Chair, I would ask you could add on the heart of the comment, the dues payment.
And that would be under auditor.
We could put it under 9E. Should take a minute.
And we'll just start with that as the first one before going to A. Okay, anything else? A motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Okay.
Support.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Passes. This time I'll have the public comment period, and I will read our guidelines for public comment. At this time, the public are welcome to address the county board in any matter of county concern. When invited to speak, please speak into the microphone for clarity, sign in, state your name and address, and the topic you are interested in. Members of the public may speak respectfully for up to 5 minutes. The public comment period is limited to a total of 30 minutes unless we decide to extend it. County board members may ask or answer questions of the speaker, but issues shall not be debated during the public comment period. At the board's discretion, the board may agree to schedule matters addressed during the public comment period on the current board agenda or on a future board agenda. All discussions must be respectful in nature and must be directed at the board, not at other members of the public. And I also do mention that we adopted the Civility Speak Your Piece project, and the chair will use those guidelines, those principles if needed. Okay. Let's take a look at the consent agenda items. I guess no one's coming to speak. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't see a hand up. Thank you. No, that's my mistake. I should have asked.
Go ahead.
Go, Abby, go. Hi, I'm Abby Tofty, and I own the Big Lake in Grand Marais. And I'm really sorry to be late in the game on this issue on the taxes for short-term rentals. But I had heard through the grapevine that it was said that this will only affect a few housekeeping jobs, and I just want to say that that is not true. And everyone knows I cry all the time, so I might cry. I just want to say that without a doubt, this will affect my small business and my employees, and it will also affect my local customers. I am so proud to have a beautifully stocked year-round shop in Grand Marais. My slow season is an amazing opportunity to serve my local customers with unique and beautiful gifts and cards. I want to say 80% of my customers in the slow season are locals, 20% are tourists. And on that same note, at least 80% of my sales come from the tourists. Arguably a perk of living in Cook County is having amazing restaurants, gift shops, and art galleries, and grocery stores, plural, at our fingertips year-round. This will not happen if we don't have tourism in the winter.
Got it.
Please remember and consider those of us, even the small businesses, working to create year-round businesses to support our families, our employees, their families, and our local customers. Any dip in our shoulder season traffic will greatly, greatly affect our ability to be open year-round. Also, I think you're all doing a great job, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary?
I'll sign us both in.
Thank you, Mary.
My name is Mary Samus, and I work for the EDA. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. We need to be very careful about how we address the short-term rental tax classification. I'm here today because this will impact all property owners in Cook County. I called Brady with a question yesterday, and Brady, correct me if I misquote you, but what I understand is that in 2019, 48% of net property tax collected in Cook County came from properties classified as seasonal recreation residential.
That's what my report said.
Thank you. I also understand that 60% of the housing stock in Cook County is in the seasonal, or has been in the seasonal rec classification. While raising taxes on these properties in some measure might be a good thing, we must be careful to not tax them out of the short-term rental market. This will result in a drop in property values, not only for those properties, but all properties in Cook County. And that's not a direction that we should want to go. I lived on the Iron Range when LTV announced the 2001 closing of the mine at Hoyt Lakes and the ore dock at Taconite Harbor. The communities on the east end of the Iron Range have about 8,000 residents. Cook County has about 5,000 residents, and together we all shared the pain of losing 1,400 full-time year-round jobs. On the Iron Range, the East Range response team was immediately formed to address how the communities and the families would survive this huge loss of jobs. That's not a direction that we should want to go. If we reduce a significant portion of our tourism-based economy to 50% of their operating capacity, the loss will be greater than the sum of the parts. Those properties and all properties will lose value. Our dedicated work to establish a full-time year-round economy will not be able to go forward. New and long-time business owners will lose a full-time year-round revenue stream. Workers will lose full-time year-round jobs, some with benefits, to part-time seasonal work. And I have to ask, does it make sense for us to continue with our workforce housing initiatives if we're going to lose our full-time year-round economy? We'll have to just see where this goes. But I don't think this is the direction that we should want to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have copies of this. If I leave them with Stacy, will you get them?
Okay, anyone else? Move on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to pull anything before you respond or not? I would just like to comment that under F, replace Mini Excavator, the The authorization is for $62,675 to replace that unit, but we do have about $60,000 in insurance from MCIT that covers that. So just want to clarify that on the agenda. So are there any things that anyone wants pulled for further discussion? If not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items.
So moved.
Support.
Oh, okay.
Jenny can have it.
Okay, Jenny seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. First agenda item is the Chamber of Commerce and some of the testimony that was given in public comment. I'd like to call forward Jim Boyd, who will make a presentation, and any others on this vacation rental classification issue.
Sure. Board Chair Bursheim, members of the County Board. My name is Jim Boyd. I'm Executive Director of the Cook County Chamber. First, I wish to apologize for my role in creating confusion and concern with the process of this request. It really was unintentional. We're in unfamiliar waters. Because of your full agenda, I'm going to summarize my remarks, but I would like you to have my more extensive comments, which I've passed out. Although this is a very complicated issue, it is in both your interest and ours that the legislature act to put in place a reasonable solution. We're asking that you endorse what we propose so we might take it to the legislature. Senator Bach has made your agreement a requirement for moving forward. The specifics of our plan are spelled out in the resolution we offered to you in draft form in the packet you have. If you cannot support what we seek, we ask that you work with us and others to craft a proposal that protects the economy and the people of our county. A month ago, Assessor Bob Thompson established a 183-day primary use test for deciding the property tax status of short-term rentals. Rent for less than 183 days get taxed at one of the lowest rates. Rent for more than 183 days get taxed at the highest rate. If that scheme remains Cook County policy for 2021 and beyond without modifications, you will lose significant tax capacity. If nothing happens, you lose tax capacity. As Thompson reported to you last week, most properties will stay under the 183-day limit. But if that happens, something else will also happen. Significant long-term harm will be done to the delicate, tourism-centric economy that powers life in our county. The proposal we hope you will join us in recommending to the legislature builds on the 183-day test Thompson put in place as Cook County policy. By allowing resort condos to rent up to 250 days yearly, and by replacing the punitive commercial rate with a more modest increase, it would reduce your tax capacity loss, it would reduce the damage done to our economy, and it would help ensure future growth in both tax capacity and the economy. If nothing changes, the sky won't suddenly fall. But forcing short-term rentals, which make up more than half the available lodging in Cook County, to rent for fewer than 183 days under threat of tripled taxes will undo much of the hard work invested in creating a more year-round economy here. Your own bond counsel tells you every spring that you save 1% or 2% on bond costs because the rating agencies now recognize that Cook County has a true year-round economy. I included in the papers I distributed, on the top sheet really, the 2019 property tax rate sheet for Minnesota. If you're looking at it, you're looking at the most complicated property tax system in the country. But I've highlighted parts. If you looked at the highlighted classes, you will see that there is not one category, not one, in which a commercial tax rate is applied to residential property, not to agricultural non-homestead, not residential non-homestead, which is taxed for long-term rentals, not manufactured housing, not bed and breakfast, not mom and pop resorts, not housing for seasonal workers, not one. These properties simply cannot support commercial taxation, and they have never been asked to do that. Our efforts to create a more robust year-round economy has made us so much better off than we were just a few years ago. Census estimates tell us we have all but stopped the hemorrhaging of young people. A passel of new entrepreneurs, many of them young people, including Abby Tofty, have joined our more established businesses. Income from visitors is critical to the financial health of our hospital and a number of other vital institutions on which the residents of Cook County rely. Almost half the visits to the county hospital's ER are by people who don't live in Cook County. They pay commercial rates, which subsidize services to many of our residents. Without the income from visitors, fish hooks, hiking accidents, ski accidents, and the revenue that provides, our hospital's continued existence would be in greater jeopardy. And what about the many, many businesses that stay open through the winter and keep their staff employed despite losing money, including Java Moose, Joins, Stone Harbor, Northern Wild, and on the list goes. Their losses will only grow if we deliberately shrink our economy. One cardinal principle of tax policy, it really is a cardinal principle, is that taxes should have the lightest possible influence on market economics. Taxes should not cause businesses to do something they otherwise wouldn't do, or stop doing something that they otherwise would do. Requiring more than 600 rental units in Cook County to rent for no more than 183 days or face property taxes that are 300% higher violates that principle in a huge way that will leave the county and its people much the poorer. If you agree that that's true, please work with us to craft a solution we can all endorse, we can all take to St. Paul. Doing nothing really isn't a responsible option for any of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Linda Jurek, Executive Director of Visit Cook County, our destination marketing organization for the county. I want to start with the mission statement for our organization. The mission of Visit Cook County is to enhance and grow a sustainable economy in Cook County. And our vision and statement includes providing solutions to tourism and visitor-related interests of our region. The economics of tourism, it's a big, big deal, not only around the world, the United States, in Minnesota, and most definitely out our front door in Cook County. Research shows that if you visit Minnesota, you are 54% more likely to think this is a really good place to start a business, and 76% more likely to consider this a good place to live. In 2017, 73 million people visited our state, totaling $15.3 billion in economic impact. We are so fortunate to live in one of the most beautiful places in our state. I think many would agree that the UP of Michigan is also a pretty beautiful place. Unfortunately, when you research the UP, you'll also see hundreds of small ghost towns, specifically on the Keweenaw Peninsula. When other industries failed, they turned heavily toward tourism, and now are rebuilding with that focus. I use the UP as a comparison because of the Lake Superior shoreline. However, the reality exists closer to home. When analyzing household income and the unemployment rate, Virginia and International Falls, Minnesota were recently reported as the top 2 poorest cities in the state. We need to recognize and embrace the fact that tourism is our major economy. The Gunflint Trail Tourism Association was established in 1936. That's 84 years ago. The organization was created as a business activist group, recognizing that a cohesive, cooperative decision-making process and a unified tourism voice was paramount. Other communities look toward us as leaders in the tourism industry. Between all of our resorts and lodging properties, over 1,000 jobs exist. The changes proposed will not only affect a few housekeeping positions. I have sample guides with me today dating back to the 40s and the 50s. Check out that. The guides were created to promote travel and tourism to the Minnesota Arrowhead. People love it here. The communities that grew along the shore and inland grew much in part to the support of a tourism economy, and the entrepreneurs settled here to provide the services that we need, and that has not changed. Visico County has been working for years to build stronger shoulder season traffic, and yes, it's true that the measurement of our success as an organization is the growth in lodging tax collected. However, let's remember that that lodging tax is paid by our visitors. I have a graph, which I've handed out and you'll see later, which documents the growth in our shoulder season traffic. In summary, the top 5 months of growth from 2011 to 2017 are April at 60%, June at 59%, May at 58%, October at 48%, and November at 43%. These visitors eat in our restaurants, buy our gas, and shop in our stores. The financial impact is apparent when you see new businesses opening and existing businesses being able to reinvest. New storefronts exist at Blue Water, south of the border, Joints Ben Franklin, new windows, a deck top at the Gunflint Tavern, the list goes on. Entrepreneurs have also joined this growth and started businesses like the Big Lake, Upstate Min, Fika Coffee, North Shore Winery, Jewelers of the North, just to name a few. Would any of these businesses be able to survive or have started even in the first place without a year-round sustainable economy? Our organization is a perfect example of the employment halo effect of tourism. Our administrative team includes 3 young locals that have willingly returned to Cook County and positioned themselves in a tourism workforce. In closing, I would like to just encourage you to study the facts and to think with very bold vision. The proposals to our tax classifications have long-lasting economic effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Could you wait till we have discussion, please?
I think it's a point of order question, is it not, Dave?
I don't know. I'm just curious about the process here. We have time set aside for the Chamber of Commerce proposal, and I just didn't know if we should be asking questions now to speakers as they're coming up and leaving, or if, I mean, it seems...
Good question. I think as chair, we'll have it open to the board after they made their presentation.
Okay.
I consider this as a presentation.
Okay.
So if we could
Thank you.
continue, is that okay?
Yep.
Thanks.
How long is the presentation? How many more are coming up?
I'm the last.
Okay. Can you talk fast?
I will. Hi, my name is Dennis Wisdahl. I own the American in Tofte and manage Bluefin Bay and its related properties in Tofte. I'm going to talk about 2 things today. One is just a quick reiteration of what I spoke of when I spoke as in your citizen input session, I think back in December. But mostly I want to talk about the economics of seasonal rec second home ownership in Cook County. There's been discussion about the tax classification of these homes representing a basic unfairness because they're in the same business as hotels, but they're taxed at a lower tax rate. Owning the American, which is a hotel and is taxed as a commercial property, and also managing all of the units of Bluefin, I am involved in both sides of this question. American pays just about $60,000 in property taxes per year, which represents about 5.5% of its gross income, gross rental income. Within Bay units, as seasonal rec properties, pay between 4.4 and 5.6% of their gross revenue as taxes under the current tax classifications, or under the tax classifications that existed through 2019. Yet the rates are very different between commercial and seasonal rec, so why do they end up paying the same percentage of their income? Because taxes are a function of tax rate plus estimated market value, and seasonal rec homes are valued basically at their construction or replacement cost, whereas hotels are valued based on their net income and bottom line earnings. And much more is invested per $1 of rental that one can earn in a second home than in a hotel room. Cook County has an interesting tourism lodging infrastructure. The county economy hasn't justified building standalone full-service resorts for a long, long time. The economics just aren't there. There's not enough income available to pay all the expenses and still cover debt service. In fact, that same thing must be true in recent years for hotels, because I think our American, built 29 years ago, is the last new hotel to be built in Cook County. New hotels cost about new Americans cost about $90,000 a room, once including furnishings. So you just can't afford to build them and own them as a commercial venture in our economy. It's getting closer. It's gotten a lot closer in the recent years as the season's gotten longer. But still, people aren't choosing to do it because the economics simply don't work. So our lodging base is more than half seasonal homes that people have purchased. Many of them in resort settings, but they're owned as condominium units rather than individual investors in the resort property. Because the values, the intangible values of pride of ownership and a place for a family to gather and recreate need to be added to the basic economics of rental earnings here to justify the cost of building. There's been some comment that second home owners are wealthy people that can afford to contribute more to the Cook County tax income. And really, my experience is that in our properties is that's not very true. Certainly the people that build million-plus homes on Lake Superior have a lot of money. And in almost all cases, these people are not putting their homes available for nightly rental. I mean, if they have that kind of money, they don't want other people sleeping in their bed and other kids jumping in their couch, and they don't want to come up and see damage done by people paying a few $100s a night to stay there. All the original Bluefin buyers were working couples. I took great pride for years in the fact that we didn't have a doctor or a lawyer as an owner. Not that I don't like doctors or lawyers, but I liked the fact that middle-class working couples could afford owning at Bluefin. Things were less expensive back then, and rentals were good enough, so in those days they could pay all their expenses and pay part of their mortgage payment. The economics have changed a lot since then. Properties are aging, expenses have grown faster than revenue, and most don't cover operating costs with income, much less pay off mortgage payments, which is very different than in the 80s and the 90s. Values of homes that are for sale still haven't gotten back to pre-recession values of 2004, 5, 6, and 7. Many units are for sale and there's very few buyers. The sheet I handed out with the yellow highlights shows what's for sale at Bluefin and Surfside and how long they've been in the market. The average time these units have been in the market is 657 days. They're listed below the pre-recession prices. People hang on to them hoping they can get what they paid, but little by little they get used to the fact that they won't, and prices start going down, and then assessed values start going down. The next buyer coming along doesn't want to pay more than the last buyer, so there's a slow de-escalation of values that results. And that's despite, we've invested over $6 million since 2010 in the common elements and inside the units. So our owners, we realized what was happening, that we were aging and needed to reinvest to stay current. Most of the other condo resort properties in the county haven't made that kind of reinvestment. There would be hundreds of these units for sale if there was market. I was told recently that over half the units at Caribou Highlands are on the market, and there are 20-some more waiting in line for things to sell so they can list. And they're in need of massive amounts of reinvestment. And the income no longer pays existing operating expenses, much less leaving money left over to reinvest and upgrade. So a significant increase in property taxes would only put them in a deeper hole economically. As I think has been mentioned before, more than half of the lodging revenue in Cook County comes from condos and homes that are rented on a nightly basis. And so that becomes critical infrastructure for an economy that's 80% plus tourism based in the county. We also heard that 40% of the local tax base comes from these homes. So they're critical to the county economy at a whole number of levels. And it seems to me it's in the best interest of the county to encourage upgrades of these properties as opposed to increasing taxes in a way that makes their economic situation yet more difficult. Some of these have been in the same hands from the same developers for many, many years, and have recently sold to new people who've come in the county with the intention of investing a lot of money and bringing them back up to standards. But to see the tax classification change in a way that puts another big expense into the picture is going to make it much harder for these people who want to reinvest in our county to do so. So we put forth a proposal that seemed to be in line with policy coming out of the county assessor's office. I'm understanding that's evolving a little bit as more discussion happens, which is natural. So like Jim Boyd, I only ask that you work with us to come up with a tax situation that we can jointly recommend to Senator Bach and the legislature that keeps taxes on these properties at a level that allows them to stay in business on a year-round basis and make the upgrades they need to become competitive. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just make a few comments about background on this, and some of it was alluded to by Dennis. The reason this is on the agenda is that Senator Bach had asked us, as well as the chamber, to come up with some kind of proposal or resolution that we could mutually support, if possible, so that there would be an attempt to change legislation at the state level. And I think, our concern is what it does for Cook County, and wherever it goes from there, I guess, is up to Senator Bach and the group that they have that, but that's the reason it's on the agenda. I received the resolution and looked at it previously, as well as Rena Rogers, our interim administrator, and Molly Hicken, who will be coming in a while. She's been busy the last couple of days out of town and is going to try to get here by 9:30. So we took a look at it, and then yesterday, the leadership team reviewed the resolution as well. Attorney Hicken, interim administrator Rogers, and myself had sort of marked up some copies that we received, and with concerns that we have as far as language and what it means and its intent and its implications. And so we've gone through that process. So at the leadership team yesterday, we said we should bring this forward, and at this time would ask for commissioners to individually respond in whatever way they appear. At this point in time, I think unless we can be, change our typical process, we're not going to have interaction with the presentation. We typically don't do that, but would entertain if we wanted to do a motion or something to change that procedure, we certainly could. But after that, then I think we'd like to discuss how to move forward, and there are various ways to move forward or not to move forward. And so I'm going to ask if we'll just go by who wants to raise their hands first for comments, and let everyone comment, and then we'll go from there as far as further action or not. You got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm confused by your comment, we don't interact.
Well, typically we haven't, but if you really want.
I don't know what you mean, we don't interact.
With the presentation.
We always interact with the presentation. Anything that's on our agenda, any staff that comes in here, it's an interaction. It's always been an interaction,
Okay.
always.
All right, thank you. Everyone agree to that?
I think it's pretty typical that we do have questions, and that's
Sure.
kind of
All right.
the purpose of presentations. And I had a question earlier.
Right.
And at this point, I'm just trying to navigate what's going to be most productive, and
Okay. Well, let's go, we can go ahead and open it up for discussion and ask questions and make your comments of those presenters.
So you said you have changes to the language?
I think I wouldn't want to share those at this time myself, because I'd like to hear from the other commissioners.
I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I guess the summary that I've gathered from these presentations is that this is a significant issue, and that it requires the county's cooperation.
Right.
And I'm just curious if any of us disagree with that.
Commissioner Mills, I was also part of the conversations in creating these different codes along with our assessor. So this group hasn't acted independently. And I support what they're bringing forward. It was a very good discussion on this. Does that help, or do you have more questions?
I guess my question is, do you see this as an insignificant issue?
No, it's not insignificant.
Right.
We need to pass this today, because legislation is starting. We need to move forward.
Well, I guess I was just confused by the presentations, because it was almost as if we needed to be convinced that this is a significant issue, and it was my impression that we all recognize the significance of it. Fully on us for not maybe being more involved earlier, but at this point going forward, I think we certainly need to have a committee and to go through this. I have a lot of concerns about the resolution, but so you're saying you were involved in the creation of this resolution?
Not the resolution.
Oh.
But in the different class codes. and where we're at. Bob? you
Mr.
wanna-
Chair, if I may
Yep.
address
Sure, thank you.
Dukirk's comments. I did give a presentation to the group that developed this resolution. Commissioner Dukirk was there. It was the presentation I gave to the committee of the whole last week, essentially showing what different rates would result in the final, numbers of the tax bills for different values. That was the only participation I had. After that, there was some discussion back and forth. I remember some emails where, maybe they were going to tweak this or that, but the final resolution, what I see that's up on the board here, and all the numbers and I guess the policy of it, that was not developed by me, and I really didn't have a whole lot of input on that.
Oh, that was the chamber.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, I respect your comments, and I think they're worthwhile. My comments about having it being reviewed and discussed, as well as the comments with the leadership team yesterday, we have before us a resolution that was in the packet, and I guess I'm asking that, do we need more work on this? And I'd like to ask commissioners, or do we accept it as it is? And so we can follow this in a logical way. And then we can go on to how we deal with that. But it was a suggestion that we get some kind of working group to take a look at this with it, which would include the assessor, and then we could come back with comments or work with the chamber. And the goal here, again, is to try to get something to Senator Bach in a reasonable amount of time. So, Commissioner Dukirk, if you want to comment on
When does this need to
that.
be to Senator Bach?
Commissioners, when we met with Senator Bach and Representative Eklund in Evelyn in December, he said he would very much like us to get a proposal to him by, quote, the end of January. That was off the cuff, and I think that my sense would be that if that's budged by a week or so, that's not a problem. When does the legislature actually?
February 11th is the beginning of the session, which is also your next meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So I'd like us to get the language done in this meeting if possible, and Ginny had her hand up.
Sure, Jenny.
Thank you. As a former business owner of 2 businesses, and I still own a part-time business, I really understand the significance of this in the county. I think the way it's presented here, I did sit in on the meeting with the assessor. The main thing is the change, the 4CC1. Do I understand that right?
Yeah, and actually, I would like to, kind of give you the,
Right.
when I read this, what it breaks
Yeah,
down,
right.
what it really means in the end.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, I can do that now, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I would guess, before we do that, I would like to hear from Commissioner DeShaw. He hasn't commented yet.
What have the other counties come up with?
Well, the other counties, as far as I know, they're not really looking to develop a resolution. Actually, this was part of the discussion we had when I was down in St. Paul at the Senate building a couple weeks back, is typically, counties do send people down to support things like this, a proposal or a resolution like this, but usually, if it's something that is really worthwhile, it'll go to a bigger organization like the Association of Assessors or Association of Minnesota Counties. It kind of grows. I know this is certainly not specific to Cook County. There's other counties that are having a lot of concerns, but as far as I know, I don't know of any county boards that are adopting resolutions or anything like that, or working on, even drafting new legislation.
Jim?
If I could add to what Mr. Thompson said, you all know that we have a representative in St. Paul, Judy Erickson. She consulted with other statewide groups, like Hospitality Minnesota and others. Their response typically was that they're so conflicted internally that they can't take the lead on this. And when we met with Senator Bach, he basically said that the assessors are looking to Mr. Thompson for leadership, And the organizations are looking to us for leadership, and so, lo and behold, this small county in northeast Minnesota is being required to take the lead on this. That was what he basically told us, that everyone is looking to us to see how to resolve this issue. It's not a role that we enjoy or wanted, nor I'm sure one that you wanted. But that seems to be where we find ourselves, is that everyone is looking to us to see how to go forward.
I just would like to reiterate that, yes, that could be something that's going to happen in the future, but I think I would like to express, at least from my point of view, that we have to be, as far as our authority as a board, that we have to be looking at Cook County as our point of reference for making any kind of recommendation for a resolution, unless it specifically states in the resolution that we're offering this, and I didn't see that there, but
Senator Bach made clear to us that our role was to find something that will work for Cook County.
Good.
Not to try to resolve all the problems
Thank you.
of the state of Minnesota. We can't
Thank
do
you.
that.
Right. Thank you.
We were looking to develop something that would work for us,
Right.
and that can then be offered to the state.
I agree. Okay, as board chair, I'd like to know, and we can go to Robert. There are some language issues here that I'm concerned about. One is, and there's several of them, and they have to do with whether we have authority to do it or not. And the one thing is supports a year-long moratorium. This is not possible. So I don't think we should be asking for something that's not possible. That's just one technical thing. There are some other things in there as well, as I think we need to further discuss the tax rate as well, based upon your presentation last week. So, but I guess in, respect to comments made previously, I would like to ask if anyone could accept this resolution as it was proposed to us in the packet as it is, that was presented to us. Just to give it a poll here, how many of you could support the exact wording of the resolution that comes before us?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I really would like Bob to go through this.
Sure,
He
before that?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
Right, so you're going to be explaining this resolution.
Yes, I'll explain the resolution and what the bottom line of it essentially means.
Commissioner Mills?
This seems more appropriate for committee work. I think it does need to go through clause by clause. I just don't know if that's something that we had planned on for a regularly scheduled meeting, because I can see it taking 4 hours.
I don't think it'll take that long.
Well,
Mr. Chair, if you'd like, I can explain the breakdown, and then you guys can take a vote on this specific resolution as it was proposed.
I think we have one commissioner that wants that. Okay.
I agree with Ginny. I don't think it's going to be that difficult to go through this. I don't know that it's going to take 4 hours.
Okay, I'm open.
Jim? Robert?
Two points. Judy Erickson's clearly watching, and she has told me that if we get something mid-February, that would be fine. Second thing is, the thing that we really want to avoid here today is just an absolute rejection of our effort.
Yeah, no, and I think that's clear. Yeah, and by rejecting or saying we can't work with what was submitted to us, that would more than likely, it would justify forming some kind of work group to work out with the chamber. And I think this was suggested by Mr. Mills, and that was discussed in our weekly leadership in a what-if situation, that we want to have agreement. And if we can't do that today, because we only can act on what you submitted, and I think Commissioner Storley said, I guess you like support as it was written.
I'd like Bob to explain it.
Okay.
Point of order, we don't have to work specifically with what they stated. We can change the language and approve it today.
That would be by making motions and amending and
Yep.
wordsmithing. And
Yep.
our county attorney isn't here, and I think that person would be very important to have involved.
I can make decisions without an attorney.
I can't. Okay, let's just go hop, Dave.
I'm sorry, and I want to apologize because I believe my tone was hypercritical. I applaud the efforts for this resolution. I think we're all in agreement this is a significant issue. Just that the first clause in particular raised concerns with me right off the get-go, and so then going through the rest of it made me, it set the tone for me going through the rest of it. So thank you for putting this together. It does take a lot of work and research, and I do want to work with it and towards some kind of resolution. So I'm sorry if I sounded hypercritical.
Commissioner DeKirk?
My concern with forming a committee is that the committee will come up with language, we'll bring it here, it'll be on the 11th, and then some commissioner won't like a paragraph. So I would prefer that we all get it done together. And the county attorney will be here in 15 minutes when we figure out our language, and she can let you know if she likes it or not.
Let's go back to Robert, and then we'll act on that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair and Board of Commissioners. So, Mr. Mills, to speak to what you said about the very first paragraph right there and getting a little bit, questioning the rest of it after that, the statement there that, all properties would be switched and triple their taxes, that's absolutely not true. It would be the ones determined to be used primarily over 6 months under the current policy. They would switch to commercial, and the range from tax increases anywhere from 165 to 300%. So, yes, you could say that some properties could triple, but certainly not all of them are going to triple or would triple, even if they were all switched to commercial. And that, just to speak to some of the comment that was made regarding the 657 days on the market on bluefin units and how many are available, he gave you a list. There are 4 units, 2 in Surfside, 2 in Bluefin, that are currently on the open market. What I consider is posted with a real estate agent on the MLS. And properties that are priced right are selling in less than 657 days. So that's just, it's kind of, I guess it's a little bit deceiving with some of the numbers that are being presented and the way things are being presented to us. But to speak to this resolution and what it means in the end, kind of on the topic of what we had discussed at that committee of the whole meeting was, what does this mean to Cook County? What does this mean to the assessor's office? Well, what I read here, it says there's still a 183-day use test. So that this new classification that would be created, properties would only go into that category if they cross 183 days of rental. Similar to the policy we have now, we would still have to send out a questionnaire to 650 properties. We'd have to hope we get accurate numbers. And on the chance that some of these properties, which I talked to Mike Larson last night, and he said 0 of his properties went over 183 days. So we're creating a class for nothing. It's more or less a protection from ever going to commercial, is the way I see that this resolution breaks down. So what that means is that every property, short-term rental, would go back to seasonal rec. They'd pay the same tax that they would if they didn't have an income, unless they crossed over 183 days. Then they would go to this marginally, slightly higher class rate that was created for this use. When I sat with the group on the 6th of January, my understanding was that we were trying to eliminate these questionnaires, that we were addressing the mixed use, the seasonal use and the rental income, and that we were saying that all of these properties fit this classification. Then that was kind of modified during the meeting to look at the resort units a little differently and maybe trying to define them as the current resort classification, which is almost the same as seasonal rec. It's slightly, very slightly higher. And another thing that this does is when you go back to seasonal rec, on all of the Cascade vacation rental properties, you lose significant amount of tax capacity, which I think, when the Department of Revenue analyzes a bill that comes forward, they're going to look for a middle ground, not something that just protects the people operating their properties this way. They're going to look for a true middle ground. In their eyes, what they've said, these are commercial. So you have to look at it from that lens. You have to say, okay, these should all be classified commercial. and look at where is that middle ground from what they were to where they're going. Now, I did have a discussion with Mike yesterday about our regional meeting with assessors on Friday, and I can tell you that this is becoming a big issue where, you know, Cook County's doing it 183-day threshold. Lake County's basically changing anything that has 5 reviews in the calendar year. Some counties are just changing them and then letting the taxpayer appeal that commercial change if they found it advertised. What it boils down to in the discussion we had on Friday was, well, what is the primary use? Why, you know, the memo came out and said primary use. Now, if you look at the only tax court, the case law that actually occurred in 2014 in McLeod County, the judge looked at advertised days. If there's a push down in St. Paul to further clarify primary use, that's the direction it's going to go, is let's look at this tax court case that already happened. So, you know, the need, or the, you know, I understand that the organizations that are here today and that have presented at the last couple board meetings, the concerns are real with the impacts on the economy. In fact, anyone in here, I encourage you to go look on CBS Colorado last night. There was an article, and it addresses this exact same thing, the impacts to the tourism in a small Colorado community, the impacts to the real estate. It literally came out at like 5:45 last night, CBS Colorado. And it talks about the same concerns. This is going to the state. In fact, I think the Department of Revenue or you know, whatever that organization is down there, the equivalent, they are pushing for verbiage in the statutory language to define them as commercial and not residential. And you know, that kind of also brings up another point that I heard Mr. Boyd made, is he gave you a class rate sheet pointing out all the residential classifications and said that none of them are taxed commercially. Well, that's true until you change the use of the property, like the barber shop behind Gene's Foods. That's a residential structure that's taxed commercially in that portion of the building. The rock shop up at the top of the hill has that front entryway, the porch, is taxed commercially. So residential structures are taxed commercially when they're used that way. The question here, the big debate is renting a house a commercial use? That's where the discussion is. That's where, you know, it really boils down to opinions and lawmakers and how it's going to end up in the end. But this policy or this resolution that was put forward, I don't see it as a middle ground. I don't see it as a compromise. I see it as, hey, we're just going to protect these. They'll never go commercial if this passes. So, you know, it's up to the board what they see fit. You know, if they think that, hey, you know, that works for us, that's great. You could support something, but I can say that down in St. Paul, when you're sitting in a room full of people that are asking for more revenue and more funding and they're asking for revenue streams, and then somebody comes up and says, hey, we want to put a lid on this revenue stream, I think that the more you really do compromise on this and find the middle ground, the more likely it is to pass. So, you know, we could support something that doesn't go anywhere, or we could, you know, we could say we don't support this based on the way it's written, or, you know, it's all what you guys see as necessary. If you guys see it's necessary to maybe redefine some of this language, I know as far as my office goes and the Association of Assessors, we don't want to send out questionnaires every year. 650 questionnaires and the calls that stirs up and the emails and everything, I mean, just tracking, and it's a lot of resources. It's been the better part of the last 2 months of my office's time, just kind of dealing with the calls and the emails and filing and everything. So the 183 days before it crosses into this new classification, that will likely not be supported by Association of Assessors. That's something that I think needs to be reconsidered. I think that when you're looking at creating a new class, you're saying that this is what this property is used for. That's what a classification is. It's a definition of a use. And to say, well, this is just what it would go to if it's rented more than 183 days. Essentially what you're saying is the guy who rents his house or his cabin out is paying the same low tax as the guy who never rents it out. And that's where this unfairness has kind of been brought up in the beginning, and then also compared to the hotels and how they pay a commercial tax. I know there was some discussion about the values of these units they essentially make the taxes higher because, you know, you're valuing them and that's applied to the rates and the taxes. Also, there was some talk about the percentage of the income that goes to property taxes. Well, in any business, there's going to be a different amount of revenue. You know, if you're comparing, if Cascade Vacation Rentals owns one office and they're making $5 million a year, what's their percentage of property tax to their income? It's pretty insignificant. One of the things with these cabins is people buy cabins for a personal use. There's that intangible benefit of using it personally, and even if you don't rent it, you still have a tax bill. So, you know, those are just some of my, you know, when I look at this, it's going back to seasonal rec and then basically creating a class for anything that's rented over 183 days, and it still requires the assessor's office to send out the 185 days.
Okay, Commissioner Dukert, question, comment?
We could spend months debating this. Can we just go through this and, like, the first sentence, we can simply change that it'll be comfortable for everyone?
Okay, Robert,
Well, I mean, yeah, if you wanted to change that first, you could say any property determined to be used primarily as a short-term rental, the range of taxes increase could be 165 to 305% or 300% with an average increase of 249.
I don't even want to go there. Just change from where it says would triple current property tax burdens on affected properties. I think that's the language that some are uncomfortable. We just change that to would have a significant impact on Cook County.
Right, that would work too.
okay, so I'm going to ask you one question. Robert, so you're saying that we could do more work on this resolution from your point of view of your authority as assessor?
As far as my concern goes, is the questionnaire, the 183 days, that threshold, and still analyzing that to me isn't something that, you know, when I'm on the legislative committee and I have to send any bill that's proposed out to all the region, essentially if this came over through an email from my legislative committee and they said, hey, how do you feel about this? I would say I don't support sending out questionnaires next year.
So you have an issue with the 183 days. I got that from your presentation, yeah. Okay. Jim, we're really getting in the weeds here.
The 183 days, the seasonal, he keeps saying going back to seasonal rec. That is his policy right now.
I know.
All of them will be reclassified seasonal rec basically next year. That's his policy, not ours.
I'm aware of that.
So what will change, it brings up the question, is what will change about the Cook County policy next year? What's the proposal? If you're going to get away from 183 days.
The proposal would be that there's a new class created to define mixed use of these properties and not trying to say it's one thing or the other.
Okay. So the question is, Board Chair, I'm trying to deal with process and how to move this forward. I just got a note that Attorney Hicken won't be here till 10:30. And I'm going to do a poll of the commissioners. And I ask you to raise your hand if you think you can work on this today. The other option that I'm going to ask for is whether we should form a work group to come back, work with the chamber, and that work group, as proposed, was going to include the attorney, interim administrator Rogers, and Mr. Mills and myself as chair, and we certainly could talk about maybe someone else being on that, but I think we've spent a lot of time on it already, and so that would be the work group that was discussed, and certainly there could be others on that. So I'm going to ask for a poll whether we think we can work on this today, and then the other question, it will be, should we form a work group with the chamber and start working on this and come back February 11th with something that I think we both can agree to, because we may be able to do something here, but I think we should have dialogue with the chamber in coming up with some mutually respectful language that would cover the concerns and be more suitable, I think, to bring forward to the group in St. Paul. So I'm going to ask for raising your hand if you would like, anyone want to comment on those two options that are before us?
The options are fine, but as far as clarification, I saw something in the first paragraph, and you brought up something about support a year-long moratorium. You were not in agreement with that?
That's not possible, the one-year moratorium. That's not an option.
So that should be the change then, here too?
Yeah, and I think there's some other language, and especially the question about the 183-day language.
Yeah, on mine, I crossed out that whole last sentence or two about supporting a year-long moratorium. The board really can't do
I'm really
that.
looking at process here, and I'm going to ask the question whether we think we can do this by committee here today or have a work group work with the chamber to bring this forward with some language issues. Especially, I really want the attorney to be involved in this because there are technicalities as well as the assessor in dealing with these issues, but be very respectful to getting some kind of agreement with the chamber so that we can bring it back, and then if we want to change anything, we certainly could do that at the meeting. And it seems to be a reasonable process. So raise your hand if you want to deal with this right now for the duration of this meeting. Forming a work group. Oh, excuse me, Bobby DeShawn.
Do we need a motion for this?
I'm doing a poll, but if we want to do a motion, we can.
I'd like to make a motion that we send this back to the work group and bring it back
Okay.
on the 11th.
Very
There
good.
is no work group.
There's going to be.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion?
Mr. Chair, I would hope, let's see, February 11th is a couple weeks away, that we could get that before the 11th so that we can go through it. It's really hard to get it on a Thursday or Friday, and then we're here without any kind of dialogue, so would that be possible?
I think we'll go post-haste. We've even talked about if this goes through, a what-if situation that we could start on it tomorrow. Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, and I think this is significant enough that, and it's your prerogative as chair, but we could use a special meeting if the work group came to a conclusion quickly. I appreciate Judy Erickson's feedback, I just don't want to put it off. You know, I want to get it done, I just don't think today, right now, is the time.
Okay. Commissioner Dukert?
Rather than a special meeting, we could also have a work group with the entire board, Jim Boyd and Bob Thompson and the county attorney to hash out the language and get it done. My concern is a work group is going to bring language forward and then someone's not going to like it and we're going to sit here again and go round and round and go, can we get it done today or should we go to another meeting? And soon
have
it'll
to-
be 2025 before you guys figure out what you like.
Well, it depends on how it goes. I think it's hard to
I
be
can feel it
presumptuous.
already in how this is going.
Okay, so any other comments on the motion? Motion was made to create a work group to work with this and get it back to the group and maybe decide how that process would move forward, whether it's a special meeting or whatever. And we'd certainly be in communication, so those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And the work group would be what Commissioner Dukert proposed? The board, Jim? That's the
We
work-
haven't decided it yet.
Well, that's what I'm wondering.
The
That's why I
motion was
opposed
the work
it.
group. Bobby made the motion for the work group, and there was discussion about the work group composed of the,
Mr.
we're in the leadership team.
I'd like to make a motion for the composition of the work group to be the whole board, Assessor Thompson, Jim Boyd of the Chamber of Commerce, Linda Jurek of Visit Cook County, Attorney Hicken, and Rena Rogers.
Support.
Second.
Oh, that was support, first Heidi, I guess. Okay, so discussion on that motion.
The reason I think that is because of, to Commissioner Dukerk's point about potential back and forth, and I want to try to get this done. I think it's very significant. I think the perspectives of the Chamber and Visit Cook County are very valuable and critical for a good process, and Assessor Thompson has excellent perspective on where things lie at the state level, and how things can fly and the potential success there as well as, you know, the Chamber's perspective on that too. And then for, of course, legal advice, and I think as administrator, we need kind of the hub to help orchestrate everything.
Okay, so as far as process, if this is a work group, it would be, it would have to be published, and then when is when could we do it, and then when do our schedules permit it? And I think that's something that we'd have to talk about.
Probably
It
makes
might
it-
delay it.
Makes it out till next week, probably.
We
That's
need
my
3
guess.
days notification, Rena?
Because it's public meeting now.
And you're not available Friday, is that right?
I'm available Friday,
Oh, okay.
in the afternoon.
Yeah, well,
Because there's,
yeah, I would like to post
Okay.
it as soon as.
Well, so we have, we had a motion to form a work group which passed, and then now the definition of the work group is to be the board. Is that clear?
Yeah.
So then we go into the process of publishing that as a meeting, and then we'll have to decide when that meeting will be. But Dennis, you had a comment? I just wanted to get a point of order and where we're at.
First of all, I just want to, Assessor Thompson stated that this information I provided you wasn't accurate, and I'm a little resentful of that. I would not, out of respect for the board, bring inaccurate information to you. This is a letter from our agent who's listed under Hoblo Banker North Shore. Most of our units aren't put in the MLS because most of our buyers come from people who rent from
Okay.
us. So to make that implication and state to the board that I'm providing dishonest information really isn't constructive here. And then secondly, I think it would be helpful to have someone in the industry that really understands the economics of these homes from the owner's point of view in the work group, if that would be considered.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you for the clarification. The way I interpreted Assessor Thompson's comment was just, it maybe wasn't comprehensive, not that you were trying to mislead, but.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I use the word deceiving. I said the numbers are deceiving because the properties that are marketed on MLS, the open market, they, at the right price, they typically do sell in less than 657 days. I think almost any real estate professional would agree with that.
So I do recall the word deceiving. And that was your choice of words. How I took that was not comprehensive.
So this is the comprehensive list.
Okay, can we not debate this and?
So, yeah, let's get back to order here.
Mr. Chair. And Dennis suggested someone. Do you have someone in mind for us to?
Well, I think any one of us that does this every day would bring
Okay.
some real understanding of the economics and of the buyer attitudes and the owner concerns. It could be me, it could be others.
Okay.
Okay, waiting for Commissioner DeShawn.
We would have, Dennis, would you be on the board then, or?
Ginny, that's not part of the motion.
Yeah, I know.
We had a motion, and I think, Stacy, could you read that motion back to us?
Well, this hasn't been wordsmithed yet. Work group is the entire county board, Assessor Thompson, Jim Boyd from the Chamber, Linda Jurek from the Visitors Bureau, Attorney Hicken, and Interim Administrator Rena Rogers.
Okay. Another comment?
Working in lots of committees and hashing out language, the smaller the better. And there's plenty of time before the February 11th meeting to approve it, for it to get to other members of the industry to see how they feel about the language. I don't know that we need to have every single group on this committee. And there are members of this committee who've been working with this all along.
Commissioner Mills.
Sorry to drag out discussion. My intention for recommending Jim Boyd is, as a chamber member, to try to represent all of the groups involved, because each, Dennis, your organization has a different structure than another organization, and so to have the most comprehensive viewpoint is why I recommended Jim Boyd. So I do recognize the need for the industry in there. I thought having the chamber was the best way to navigate that.
Okay, so we've had a motion to form a work group, and then Commissioner Mills made a motion to define that work group. Need to ask Commissioner DeShaw, was your intention of that work group to be the entire board?
No.
Okay. So then, thanks for that clarification. And that did pass, so.
Voted on it. Well, his passed, but our whole board one hasn't passed yet.
So, his motion which passed, and we'll get to the next motion, was for supporting a work group as defined by what was mentioned with the assessor, interim administrator, Robert Thompson, and the board chair and the vice chair. And so now we have another motion to define that work group as the entire board, and with a second. So we're going to take action on that. Okay, is that clear? So if you're in favor of the work group being defined or changed from Commissioner DeShaw's motion as a work group of a smaller nature.
Point of order, Commissioner DeShaw's work group didn't define anyone.
I just asked him.
Well, he said he doesn't agree to the current motion, but the original motion that was made to have a work group did not define anybody. It was just work group.
I'm asking Commissioner DeShaw.
I like the first one you talked about, the chair, vice chair, Bob, chamber.
And that was the intent of your work group, because work group was
Yes.
implied of that group. Okay.
Point of order.
Just the point of order is that I accept that.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have another motion that
We got all kinds of motions going here.
it would be changed to, read that again, it would be,
Form a work group with the entire county board, Assessor Thompson, Jim Boyd from the Chamber, Linda Jerk from the Visitors Bureau, Attorney Molly Hicken, and Interim Administrator Rena Rogers.
okay. So I'm calling for a vote on the motion. Raise your hand, say aye if you support it.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passes. So we will work on, against,
I was opposed.
I'm opposed
Opposed.
as well.
Mr. Chair, can we pick a date? So it can be posted?
That's going to be tough. Okay, so the earliest we could meet would be,
Everybody get out the,
Friday.
You're available in the afternoon?
I'll check calendars and see if we can do it on Friday. Otherwise, we don't
Friday
have
afternoon, it would have to be
otherwise we don't
today.
have a board meeting next week. So maybe, perhaps we could do that. I'll check. We'll find the time when most people can be there, or all people.
okay. Okay, so
Soonest would be Friday.
soonest would be Friday afternoon for me.
That's it.
I'm just checking.
The last
Okay,
one to do.
otherwise it would be the 4th, and she'll send out information to make sure we all can be there. Okay? Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you.
oh, I'll get her worked out.
Yeah, no, it'll work. This is fun.
Wake up back there, Ben.
I asked him if he was glad he got here early.
Yeah, he was here right when he was
Yeah.
here before I got here.
Yeah. Yeah, so. You got a
Oh,
post
yeah. I like it. Yeah, I mean,
Well, if you get bored, you can come plow snow at my place. If you're bored, you got a large front end loader, right? I could use about 3 miles of front end loader. Well, if you're looking for a place to park it this winter, and you can park it out of line 20, and give you a nice spot. Yeah, okay.
Nothing on it that says Cook County, it's just blank, but at least just gives them credit. What is covered? Yeah.
All right. It's, I mean, that was pretty lost control. Oh, yeah.
We had too many motions, You were in motion.
Yeah, you were in motion. You go to other places and lose that control. That is just, that is just vehicles with being. I mean, the way this was run, it's like a public hearing. That's the best my Sawzall accident field. You believe that? A running Sawzall, I was holding his hand, he jumped out of the cut, and I the running blade, shoved into there, hit that home in my thumb. Killed it almost. You going to the meeting, the transportation meeting Friday? Yeah.
Yeah, we did that for quite a while.
And, to be honest with you, I got a buddy on breakfast. He says, listen, we don't have any road budget to do anything for X amount of years either. So, well, why do you have that transportation meeting? Yeah, I know, but I mean, they crack. We can't know what's gonna happen next week, let alone the 3 years out. Oh, Lordy.
What's up, Stacy?
Hey, Ben. Did you see my email yesterday about your availability this week? You know, I haven't talked to him for another day now, and I was thinking, Pat said any day but Friday.
Okay.
You
look pretty damn excited.
Yeah.
I have a ski race on Thursday, so I'll be done.
I haven't seen her for quite a while.
Okay.
Yeah, to be honest with you.
So
No, my
tomorrow,
mom
what
was
about
telling
next
me that
week?
she
I was thinking the
found the
same
extra
thing.
and she's wandering up there.
Next week I
on
work
some other day.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
But anyway, she goes up there and they talk about Thursdays.
Yeah, she said she likes it there.
For
Where did you abstain, right there?
I haven't checked my
Well, okay, so you raise your hand higher. That's sometimes I look back on the video. Is that
Oh, that one there.
Yeah. I can't remember the section racing.
You abstained or you said you're?
Yeah.
There's a bit of major race.
Maybe a little of both.
It's all confusing to my car. That was easy.
Maybe I'll check it.
All right.
Yeah, I'll get back to you this
Okay,
morning.
sounds good.
Okay.
Are you Pat today?
What's that?
Are you Pat today?
Finishing up my stuff.
Says
Did they
sheriff.
find someone to replace you?
I'll figure you replace them.
There you go.
That's even foolish to think it's
It's
possible.
irreplaceable.
Maybe see Bob's.
Next week. I wouldn't schedule it until we get our work group scheduled.
I'm way up in February. We can go on the 7th.
What day is that?
That's Friday. We got census in the afternoon.
Sure, we could do that.
Oh, boy.
So during that discussion, my watch started tapping me because my blood pressure went sky high.
I get overheated.
Making sure you're doing okay?
But it worked out.
I didn't get overheated. My watch just said your blood pressure is spiking.
What does it get up to?
That's not a good idea. That would have caused me to faint.
I just remembered that. Next Tuesday is the first Tuesday of the month.
Council of Aging, yeah, that's what I have, but I missed those.
Intergovernmental is what you requested at 11 o'clock on the first Tuesday.
Yeah, general government. But that was at, what time, 10? I've got it on
Well,
my-
11.
11.
Mhm.
Well, we can go at 8:30.
Well, it depends on if we get together as a committee for the redoing of the resolutions.
All right, kids. Let's rock and roll.
It's a long 5 minutes there, Mills.
I'm not very good at time.
Put the boots on.
Probably have a
We're
question
waiting
for
for
Brady
you.
about this, so I'm hoping.
You're important.
He's coming.
Don't start until he comes back.
I didn't mean that in, no hidden agenda.
I'm not, don't worry about it. Thank you.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order again. And we have Ben with us for information on the purchase of the X-ray machine.
Yes, thank you. So I have a quote for an X-ray machine to replace the current one that no longer works. I looked at, I think, 3 different companies, got quotes back from 2. The quotes ranged anywhere from about $14,000 all the way up to $45,000, depending on the size of the machine, the makeup. For what we need it for, this seemed to be the most reasonable. It's not a large machine by any means, but it meets the needs for us to be checking bags, jackets, things like that during the court scheduled days in the courthouse. So my biggest question would be where to pay for this. And I was going to ask Brady if it would be through like the building fund or if that equipment bond would be an option.
Okay.
I believe that Brady said we had some capacity in the bond.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what he said
And
yesterday.
I'm hoping that savings with that 911 system
Right,
that we're looking at with that
right.
grant would, and I think even what was earmarked for that phone system and what our quote came back for that was much less as well. So I'd be asking the board to approve purchasing this system.
Okay. Yeah, for the equipment bonds, is the understanding.
Do you want me to go find Brady and verify that? Okay, I'll do that. I'll be right back.
Questions?
See how quick
Okay.
we are. So
Brady, question on regards to the X-ray machine for the $16,274. We have funding for that in the...
Yes, we have additional funding in the bonding. We came in under what we expected for the, Rena, help me.
The 911 system.
Well, the 911 system proposal, plus they may get a grant, and then prior to that. So we have plenty of money. We're going to have to look for other equipment to use the rest of that bond, so let's
Okay.
use this.
Okay, so any questions, Commissioner Starley?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the one out in the lobby that
Correct.
everyone goes through, and so everyone uses it. Anybody else? I mean, it's just here in the courthouse
Correct.
that you're asking for
Yeah,
this.
part of this
Okay.
contract is really they don't want the machine moved. Anytime you move it, they have to recalibrate it. It takes a lot of time, and that there is, part of the maintenance contract states not to move it. So it would be just for the courthouse.
And the initial service then is good for the first year, and then after that, the $3,450 will be charged for the next 2 to 5 years?
Correct. Yep, annually for years 2 through 5. And that, I believe there's a two times a year they come out, do a maintenance check on it, any parts that need to be replaced, any work. That is part of that $3,450 per year.
So that would be included in our motion to include that. Can we do that with bonding?
No, we just read initial purchase.
Yep, so just the initial, but that will be a budgetary item
Correct.
for you. Okay, thanks. Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So any movement or just like moving from building to building? Like, because I know we slide it to the side.
Well, that machine, once it's put in, it's
heavy or?
Yeah, it's made not to move.
Okay.
Where I think you might be thinking of the metal detector.
Oh,
That's a separate machine. That one we slide out of the way, but
Yeah.
the X-ray machine itself will stay
Okay.
right where it is. Thank you.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion to purchase.
Motion to purchase an X-ray machine at $16,274 in the equipment bond, and to also authorize the expense of $3,450 annually, years 2 through 5.
Support.
Support, okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Shared health.
It was an aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, the next contract is for the shared services between Lake and Cook County for public health nurse services. And this was a contract that was approved last year to allow Lake County's public health nurse to come up and mainly do training for our dispatcher jailers for any medical needs. One of the biggest one is administering prescription or over-the-counter medications. The Department of Corrections requires training when someone's first hired, and then every 2 years after that for a refresher training. The Sheriff's Association is currently working on an online training for this, but right now it's not ready. And so what I'm looking for is just approval for this contract for the year 2020. And hopefully by 2021, that online program will be in place, so any refreshers or any new hires after that, we'd be able to use that online training instead.
Okay, any questions? Motion?
Oh, so moved.
Okay,
Support.
okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Passes.
Thank you. And then the last one, this is a new MOU between Lake County and Cook County for medical services by Lakeview Hospital. This one, Lake County and Lakeview Hospital and Two Harbors have an agreement in place to have a doctor come into the jail and meet with inmates for medical needs. And what we're looking at is signing a memorandum of understanding to kind of join that agreement. Basically, Lake County would be charged any of the fees of the doctor coming in, but then if it's one of our Cook County inmates, Lake County would bill us for those expenses. Where I think this is really important is the cost savings for Cook County. Right now, the way our current system works, if an inmate is in Lake County Jail and they need to be seen by a doctor down there, if it's not an emergency, say it's a regular appointment, we have to send a deputy down there, pick them up, bring them to the clinic, sit with them while they're with the doctor, bring them back to Lake County, drive back up. Usually that's done with deputy overtime, and so you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 4 hours of overtime, plus the bill to the clinic for those services. And so what would be nice with this agreement is, again, the doctor comes in, they're only charging, I believe it was in the Lake County contract, it's 15-minute increments. So if the doctor only sees them for a half an hour, we're only paying for a half an hour versus, normally you go to the clinic, you pay a flat fee for however long that visit is. If it's 15 minutes or an hour, you're still paying the same amount. So I do believe there's a cost savings in that as well.
Okay. Any questions? Commissioner Dukert?
Are those fees passed on to the inmate?
No.
Man, I need to commit a crime.
If the inmate has their own insurance, it goes through their own insurance, but if they do not have insurance, then the county pays. We do submit those bills to the state, and we usually pay what the Medicare rates are, which is pretty much around half.
Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can we track the costs of doing it this way? Because we haven't done it this way in the past, right?
We have not.
Right.
The way I believe it's going to work is, when we get our monthly bill for our boarding fees for any inmates that are staying in Lake County, it'll just be added onto that as the medical services fee. So it'll show which inmate and how much we're paying per inmate.
So we'll be able to do a comparison from previous years next year?
Yes.
Okay. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
I would say we do keep track. Well, I guess I should take that back. I don't think we've kept track of the transport fees when we send a deputy down just for the medical.
Sure.
I think because the transport's only really a mile from Lake County Jail to the hospital, where if we're doing transports for court, things like that, we've kept track of that much more.
Commissioner Dukert?
I think that's hard to track because we could have a year where the inmates don't get sick at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're just asking Melissa to track things that are.
Very low.
Okay. But it will be, I can say for sure it'll be a cost savings versus, we're only paying for the services when they're used. So we're not paying a doctor to be on call or anything like that. It's just if they do see one of our inmates, we'll be charged at that point.
I read that and I thought it was a great plan.
Yep. And the county attorney has gone over this this MOU. She made some amendments to it, and so this is the final proposal.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks for all you do. Okay,
It was a real quiet second there.
transportation grant
Mad at you.
applications, highway engineer Foster. Kristen?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, colleagues, and members of the public. I did a little bit of preparation for this week's presentation. This might be a lot of information in a short period of time, so please do interrupt me with any questions. Of course, typically, we would bring any one of these items before the board before we apply for any grants for future transportation projects or potential projects. In this case, knowing what we know about our long-range transportation plan and the fact that not all of our needs can be met with the funding that we have, I took the leap of faith in guessing that we didn't want to miss these opportunities in the latter half of December. But again, please do interrupt me if you have any questions on these projects. We have been working through this at the committee level over the past couple of months. I'll start with an update on our next federal project here in Cook County. These are the funds that Commissioner DeShaw brings back home to Cook County by participating in what we call the Area Transportation Partnership. In this case, we do plan a few years ahead for this program, 5 years typically. So in 2024, Cook County will be awarded in the neighborhood of $1.48 million towards towards one of our unmet transportation needs. One of the strings of this type of funding is that it is limited to a group of highways that are called major collectors. We have some important needs here in Cook County, not the least of which is County Road 45 or future preservation of the Arrowhead Trail. Those are examples of two roads that are not eligible for this funding source. Only some of our roads are eligible for this particular funding source. To make a long story short, it really came down to two projects at the committee level when we discussed which project to nominate for these funds. One of them would have been the reconstruction of 8th Avenue West in town. At this point, we don't know a lot about that project. Does that road require reconstruction? Can it be preserved with a mill and overlay? What is the condition of utilities underneath the road? More importantly, however, we're looking at reconstructing 5th Avenue West, which is our top urban priority, around the same time, and guessing we don't want both 5th Avenue West and 8th Avenue West potentially under construction at the same time. As you'll see in our transportation plan, there are other funding sources that we can use towards any of those needs. We'll be talking about bonding for County Road 45 specifically. After we finish the 5th Avenue West project, we'll be able to leverage Cook County's municipal state aid account towards improvements to 8th Avenue West someday. And of course, we receive our annual state aid allotment for CASA 16 and some of our other state aid highways or other sections of the Gunflint Trail that didn't make the cut for this recommendation. One thing that's important to know on this one, as you may have heard at the federal level through NACO and other organizations, the FAST Act, or our federal funding bill, is set to expire in September. Now, all states plan ahead 5 years, as we are for this project, but just know that if the structure of those federal funding programs changes, if the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program changes, we could receive more or less funding for this project. We need to start working on it. In the meantime, we need to plan ahead. Congress has always honored current funding levels when they transition to a new federal program in the past. I don't say that to worry anyone. I just note that we are planning for a program that assumes an extension of FAST Act funding levels for the next 5 years. The project that we end up with is to preserve sections of the Gunflint Trail. You'll hear more about this spring as we walk through our transportation plan. Preserving the system that we have was one of the top priorities that we heard through the transportation plan survey that we did. Now this road is admittedly not in poor shape, and I note that because why would we fix a road that's in good shape instead of fixing a road that's in poor shape? And we'll talk more about that as we walk through the transportation plan process. Again, to cut a long story short, the project that we submitted for a recommendation would be to preserve the Gunflint Trail between 5th Avenue West and Devil Track Road. This would include paving a wider shoulder uphill towards Pincushion Mountain. There are some notable intersection bumps in this area we'll be fixing. There's a safety issue at Hogs Bend. We'll be looking at some unique designs for the scenic byway to add some guardrail in that area. We might consider adding a turn lane at Devil Track Road. Given the time we have to plan for this project, we'll be able to evaluate whether or not the addition of a turn lane impacts the historic nature of that corridor. So stay tuned for that. All of those factors contribute to why we have a wide range of costs this project could be. Are we going to add the turn lane, or would that change the character of the road? What type of underlying soils do we have as far as exactly how many inches of blacktop do we need to put down? How many culverts are we going to replace? Do we need to purchase right-of-way? Those are all questions the Highway Department will work through to narrow down that range of costs over the next few years. Are there any questions on this future Gunflint Trail project or the federal transportation funding in general?
Commissioner Mills? Thank you. You may have just answered that, but all of those factors are, I'm assuming, part of the discussion for the whole length of the route there, or the project. But I was in particular curious about the factors with that turn lane. If there's any other specific factors there, is it mainly the historic, or you're looking at all those costs, culverts, thickness, right-of-way purchase, all of that, or is the biggest one the historic aspect?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mills, the biggest factor in whether or not we can add a turn lane is the historic aspect of the road. We'll have to go through a process where SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, actually weighs in on that because it is eligible for a listing on the National Register.
Thank you.
Will they come up and look at that intersection?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Dukirk, I don't know, actually.
I think you should schedule that in July.
I send a letter to one person, and anywhere between a couple weeks and a few months later, I receive a letter back, and honestly, that's the extent of my knowledge on their internal process as to how they make that decision. I'll
The
be sure to
near-death
keep you informed.
experiences are rather high during July, so we can watch that.
Okay, continue, please.
Next, we'll move on to an interesting project, or a potentially interesting project as far as the way it came about. I would say this is probably the least certain of the three grants that I'm here to talk about today. It's not every day that someone emails you and asks if you would like a free bridge. And that is honestly what happened when it comes to this Forest Service mass timber bridge construction and assessment research project. There's a group at South Dakota State University who's working with a Minnesota-based company known as Wheeler. They're very common in the timber bridge industry. They were looking for a national park in the Midwest, preferably Minnesota, where they could construct a bridge and monitor the traffic impacts on it over the course of time. They reached out to us and Grand Portage to see if there could be a place in Grand Portage National Park where we might explore putting a bridge if they're awarded the funding. And that's the extent of the effort we put into this project at this point. If South Dakota State University receives the grant, of course, we'll have to work out an agreement between all parties this summer as to who pays for what and what exactly the timeline might look like. We'll be starting community involvement to work closely with the Grand Portage community. If this project comes to fruition, what we know right now is that we've submitted a letter of support, at least that we're interested in exploring this potential project, and we should find out in May if we are awarded this grant or not, or if South Dakota State University, rather, is awarded this grant.
Cool. All right. Great opportunity.
If there aren't any further questions on that one, the last one that I have to talk about today would be a Safe Routes to School engineering grant. MnDOT has a solicitation out, or they had a solicitation out to fully fund engineering studies around schools across the state. And there's a very active Safe Routes to School committee, as many of you know, here in Grand Marais. They would like to see a study of County Road 7 in front of our two schools here. One of the strings of this grant is that it must be managed by a local professional engineer, and there aren't too many of us in town. There are some, but I guess that's me. The most important thing to know about this one is that it is a fully funded grant. We're here to support the process if the Safe Routes to School Committee is awarded the grant, and this one we'll find out pretty soon, actually, sometime here in February. We're expecting to hear if we got this grant. If the MnDOT does select us to award a study of County Road 7, it would happen sometime in the next 3 years. Not necessarily this summer. We don't know if we would be at the beginning of that study or the end of that study. They're working with a consultant and many schools across the state. So stay tuned to see if we'll find out more about what we can do to improve pedestrian safety in the school zone, which of course will be one of our interests independent of a grant.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the presentation and all you do with our highway department. It's appreciated.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the MIS department. The first thing is update that was in our packet.
I'll switch roles here.
I'll sit here anyway. Good morning, Commissioners. Mr. Chair. Every year I try to do an update of what we've been doing in the MIS department to give you an idea what projects we've been working on, what our focus is, what we've accomplished, and where we're going next year. And so this is just kind of, I think it's the 4th or 5th year I've done this. So starting, what I'll try to go through very briefly, because I've done this before, is an overview of what the department does, our mission and vision, and some of our key strategies, and then how our project results measure up to those strategies, how we've accomplished those things, and what projects we're looking forward to in 2020. So I can never guarantee that I'm going to cover those things in the exact order that they're listed there, but I'll do my best. Okay, so really briefly, our mission is providing technology solutions that enhance the delivery of county services. And I think, as I've pointed out before, county governments and governments in general existed a long time without technology. But even though some people might wish that were still the case, it's not really possible anymore, because most of our partners in the federal government and state require us to have technology in place to provide programming that we're mandated to do. So, and obviously, our citizens expect us to provide things online for them as well. So technology is here to stay. So the trick is, how do we make sure that technology doesn't get in the way? How do we make sure that that our work is better for the technology and it's not just a cost center, or it's not something that's a headache? That's what our mission's about. So we have 3 distinct service areas within our department. We have actually IT services, we have GIS services, and we have radio communication services that also include our tower management system. So our vision used to be quite long when I first got here, because we had a lot of stuff to fix. But our vision is very simple now. It's just great services always available. And a vision, I would just clarify, is something on the horizon that we strive for in all of our work. And so simply every project that we talk about, we're always saying, does that provide a great service? How do we make that a great service? And how do we make sure that through security or through keeping our network up, that it's always available when it's needed? So the key strategies that we have to support that vision are infrastructure excellence. And infrastructure excellence includes redundancy, and includes security. Cloud services are becoming an increasing tool that we use to ensure redundancy and security. It's also about specific systems that get replaced. Last year, we replaced the gas buoy system that was very old, which provides gasoline and tracks it for not only county vehicles, but other entities in the county. So keeping those systems up to date, because they provide a service as well. It's also our tower construction and upgrades, and it's and in our infrastructure excellence, we've also included things now like tower maintenance, or tower monitoring, excuse me. So we're using some network capabilities, and along with radio capabilities, to provide better monitoring for temperature and other things at remote sites. So in the past, when something would go down, a tower would be offline, Rowan might have to drive in the middle of the night in 20 below zero, to Gunflint Tower, just to find out that, the reason it's out is because the temperature has dropped in there. And with some remote monitoring, he might have a better idea what the issues are, so that he can be more prepared when he does go there, or call the right person. So we're increasing our capacity with that. Defining and refining MIS processes, this is stuff I call the last mile. This is, we have done a lot of work on our infrastructure, and it's improved dramatically. So this is policy work, this is process work. These are the things that make sure that going forward we maintain the progress that we've made. E-government solutions, these are all the things that ride on our foundation. Our website, more mobile devices, the monitoring I spoke of. Mobile services, those are increasing with better cell service in the county, which rides on our towers. But also, as that happens, more tablets and mobile devices for field work for our various land services areas. And then one that we added last year, which I feel is very important, is customer service excellence. How do we respond? How do we support our end users better? So with that, really briefly, in information technology, we have two broad areas, and we have two staff in those areas. One is end user and web services, providing our website, but also our internal intranet and some of the other internal collaborative tools. And this includes, the end user includes all of our desktops, mobiles, voice over IP phones. Just to give you an idea, it provides all of those things, as well as specialized technology that some departments have. And network and server infrastructure is all of our servers, our network devices, the internet, and increasingly important network security, which is a kind of a constant challenge in the world today. And then the third area that they both share, that actually we share as a department, but it's in the IT area, is our help desk services with the launch of a new help desk last year, which allows us also to serve people on mobile devices, not just at their desk. Not just at their desk. The help desk isn't just for desktops anymore. So that's that department. Our GIS department, as you know, manages most of the county's data. An amazing amount of data that the county actually has a GIS base in it. Kyle maintains that and keeps improving it, works with the other departments to do that. He has a lot of operational work as there are changes out there in properties, but also building and adding more complexity all the time to that data used by our public safety. Those projects are kind of constant with adding more addresses, 911 information, some of the big projects that are out there, Next Gen 911. He's very active in addressing and other aspects of that. He also does custom maps. We're going to be putting out a plat book this year and doing more work with our highway map, both with mobile versions of those as well as hard copy. That's on the agenda for this year. And he does he's doing a lot of custom apps for departments, particularly like land services and the assessors as well. And then last but certainly not least, and you'll hear more from Rowan in a few minutes, his quarterly report, we have radio communications, which includes our 11 towers and over 800 armor radios, and all of the administration of that and the contracting that we've been doing to make sure that our towers are sustainable. And so he'll give you an update on those coming up. I don't want to be redundant there. So I would just point out, you could manage these things separately, and some departments, some counties do. These would all be in separate departments. But I have tried to show, and I think we try to manage these in a program view that makes these things, if we manage them together, we get more value out of them. We have a bigger vision for mobile, for example, increasing mobile workforce by having cell service on one hand, mobile apps created by our GIS person, and then the platforms themselves, which are managed by our IT people. So, if we were all separate departments, we might not be able to make the kind of progress that we've made on those things. But because we talk about them and manage them together, we're, I think, making better progress with our really small team. So, what that is.
The Palladians have arrived?
The Palladians. Okay then. Just
wow.
hang out over here for a while.
system knows she's
So in
Wired, I don't know.
Time goes quickly. I will have been here 6 years in another month or so. But since we've been tracking the projects and keeping a portfolio of projects, we've completed 140 projects in our department, 5.5 years. And what's remarkable is 45 of those were completed last year, in 1 year. And I think that's remarkable. I find the professionalism and the competency of the staff that we have in MIS is just beyond compare. I've worked with a lot of different people,
Thank you, April.
Rather interesting, this is happening during the MIS presentation.
It is. I'm not quite sure what to make of that, actually.
Stand up. Yeah.
So I just really quickly, I tried to divide these up by the different strategies that we have. So our infrastructure strategy, of those 45 projects, 23 of those projects were related to infrastructure. Replacements, moving things to clouds. We replaced all of our office phones and brought the sheriff's office off of their old phone system, which was tied to 911, onto the rest of the county's system. So 23 projects is 51% of the projects. MIS process, this is mostly me writing new policies that help us with security management and vendor management and other things within our department. We also process improvement documentation, and we've automated our operational calendars. So we get automated. That's the upgrade that we did here with the rolling one, that would be one example. And the community center, what we did there for the emergency management group. These are also mapping projects, PLSS projects for the Recorder's office. So that was 6 projects at 13%. Mobile services, these are tower-related cell and other services. Mediacom, cradle point, mobile access for our deputies, that was 5 projects, 11% of our projects. And customer service, specifically, we did 3 projects of 7%, and those were help desk projects, including bringing our maintenance department onto the help desk. So can you get that clicker? Should I get it?
The clicker won't work.
Oh,
because it has to be downloaded onto the laptop.
All right. So of those 45 projects, this is by customer. I'll look by customer. So our enterprise projects, about 11% that impact all of county government. These are often infrastructure, network security type projects. Citizen projects, we had 3, or 7% are GIS apps. Website upgrades and our services on towers. We had 16% were for multiple departments. Department-specific projects, which is where a lot of work happens for, like I mentioned, Gas Boy for the Highway Department or armor projects for the Sheriff's Department. That made up our biggest category, 42%. We had one project for the commissioners, which was upgrading this room so that you can see these presentations at your desk and having this for our visitors here. And then we did 10 projects for the MIS department itself, which were mostly about policy and process and documentation. So I just want to kind of close with one last thought. The importance of infrastructure projects is about reliability and security and making sure that our services are stable and predictable, and making sure our budgeting is stable and predictable from years to years, kind of flattening that out. And overall, hoping to lower costs as we move ahead, even though we're doing more. And I would just, I don't have this in a chart, but I would just say this, that in 2017, the MIS department requested $75,000 for schedule replacement, capital expenditures, replacement of PCs and servers and whatever. As we got a better handle on our inventory, in 2018, that went up to 83,000. The following year, it flattened out, 82,000. This year, it went down to 74,000, and that's the trend. We've gotten everything kind of figured out and straightened out, and so now our costs are actually stabilizing and even lowering. So that's what you always hope to do when you take this stuff on, and we're actually starting to see that happening. So our project goals for 2020, tower contracts, I want to finish all of them for the towers, get all the tenant contracts. We're kind of down to just other public safety entities like the DNR and the U.S. Forest Service, Border Patrol. So we're working with them to get those last of those contracts. We have a number of cell service projects, and we're going to be improving armor coverage, which Rowan will give you an update on. We're going to be doing more with mobile maps, including a Google-style highway map, which gives you your location as you're moving around the county, and maybe even give you directions from one spot to another. We're doing a website overhaul. We're in the middle of that right now that's focused more on mobile users and better accessibility. Accessibility is very important, I think, and we're required to do it, so we're trying to figure out ways to improve that.
Does that include Apple?
Does it include, pardon me?
Using Apple products? Right now, it's very difficult with Apple products to access any of our stuff. They were founded April 1st, 1976. I think they're going to stick around a while.
So a lot of our problems with Apple are that users don't take the updates. And so when people don't take the updates, then things don't work. That's what we found. But
Okay.
Apple is a problem for a lot of people.
What's a problem for business owners who are trying to access our
Right.
maps and use our programs?
We do address it whenever it's brought to our attention. But a lot of times it is older Macs and ones where updates haven't been taken. So
Yeah.
there's only things that we have control over, so.
I know, it just seems that we focus on PCs more than we do on what our users are using.
Duly noted. Major infrastructure replacements this year, we'll be replacing our storage area network and our firewalls. Those are major ordeals, and we're lucky to have Keishan here for that. We'll be working more on policy development. I've got a few more policies to bring us up to date with some of the CJIS policies and public safety. We've been working hard on our internal processes to make them more secure, but we need to codify that. And service level agreements for each departments is one of the things I'd started working on before I got this interim gig. So when the interim gig is over, I'll get back to that. And security training for our end users. So that's a sample of what we have planned, and I would be happy to take any other questions.
Thanks for all you do and wearing two hats at times. Any questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Radio communication program, Rowan, Watkins.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning.
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 I have a quarterly radio communications program update for you today. We like to use this opportunity to keep the board as well as the public informed about the ongoing projects that we think are of interest, both to the board and public. Today, I will limit it to cell service projects, armor, MnDOT projects, and our outdoor BDAs or bidirectional amplifier projects that we've been working on for a few years now. I'll start with the cell service. I'll go down the list. I'll pause briefly as I move from each one, but if there's questions on anything specific, please let me know, interject, and I'll answer questions as we go on each project. One thing I would note too, just in addition to the radio communication portion of the MIS update, for what it's worth, the tower management piece, in addition to the 11 towers that we own, part of the 10 tower districts include 7 additional towers that are owned by other entities but are under located on Cook County property, so property that we control. So when you look at the scope or the scale of the tower management piece, it's around 18 towers or so. So 3 additional ones that we don't own, 3 located at Lutzen, 2 additional that we don't own on the old Ski Hill, Sawbill and Devilfish towers as well. Moving on to cell service, the first one we have is AT&T on Old Ski Hill. This was a relocation to co-locate on our tower. So they're moving off of the WDSE tower because that tower wouldn't support upgrading their equipment, adding additional antennas and radios. The civil work is completed. Excuse me. The tower crew was on site from Friday over the weekend and through yesterday, and the equipment has been hung. I don't have a go-live date, but soon we should expect to see an improvement in AT&T service right in Marais. Improvement, maybe not so much in terms of coverage. Potentially there are more radios and more antennas, so possibly some additional coverage in different outlying areas, but really more towards throughput, download, upload speeds, and capacity for how many AT&T users can function well within city limits of Marais. Moving on to the AT&T Sawbill project we have going on. In September, when I provided the last update, I mentioned that the lease execution was pushed until the end of the year, and that was to better align with the 2020 construction season. Since then, questions about underlying land ownership, the documentation that we provided were brought up by AT&T. There was some concern there. We've worked with the recorder's office and the GIS department to offer a solution in the form of a written track search as well as a visual representation of those findings to hopefully keep that project moving forward. That would take maybe a week. They said that they would like to move forward with that, they being AT&T. That's underway. The reason I mention it and the caution there is that if that doesn't suffice or they are not happy with it, the next step would probably be to have a full title report and a survey, which would obviously delay that project from going forward. Change in the timeline. AT&T at Hovland, just to summarize where we were when I was here in September, the fiber backhaul and the underlying ground lease that were both required were in place. Since then, the hopefully final round of lease changes were sent back to AT&T. That was in October, and they requested a April 1st commencement date. That's when they would like to execute the lease. That's tentatively agreed to, and we're waiting for a final legal sign-off pending environmental review, which is also underway. So all that to say that we're cautiously optimistic that we could see AT&T service at Hovland this year, spring, summer.
So the go-live day is not the same as the contract date?
No, and typically what we do with our contracts is we give them 90 days before they actually have to start paying, and it's the start of construction or 90 days, whichever comes first. In the case with the old Ski Hill, just as an example, they waited well past 90 days. They paid us for several months before they actually started construction. So they're not related as closely as you might think. The next one was Verizon at Grand Portage Info. We've had renewed interest from Verizon, and the change in equipment that they proposed since their last attempt at co-locating in Grand Portage triggered structural analysis, and what that found is that they have moved to a new TIA 222 standard, which it's the standard for how structurally capable a tower is, how much equipment it can handle, wind loading, multiple other things, ice. And the loading that we negotiated between them and T-Mobile back in 2017 before Verizon went away will no longer work with that standard, the new standard. So because of that, when that was discovered, Verizon proposed a new tower to be built in Grand Portage inside the tower district next to the next one. We've had a conversation with the land use department in Grand Portage. They took it to the tribal council, and they are interested in moving forward with that project. So we are doing that. We have a proposed location. We have a draft of construction drawings, and we need a few other documents before we'll take that to the Land Use Committee in Grand Portage, where that would ultimately be approved. Should we get that approval and we can agree with that, we would, the goal, what we would like to do on the radio communication tower management side is do a rent abatement agreement where the county would own that tower. So it would be no out-of-pocket expense to the county. We would abate half the rent to cover the cost of the tower. The reason we would do that is because it allows us to then dictate the specs instead of Verizon just building a tower that's only capable of them locating on it. We would make sure that that tower is capable of holding additional providers. Should T-Mobile or AT&T want to upgrade their equipment or other providers want to use their, we would then, per the tower ordinance, move them over to an existing tower as opposed to building additional towers.
And Verizon is willing to do that?
They are.
Excellent.
Yep.
And that just goes through Grand Portage's Planning Commission, not our Planning Commission?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there talk of putting another tower on the west end of the reservation somewhere?
Before Mike Keyport came to be our emergency manager, he and I had quite a few discussions about that, and we actually talked about a vendor that could provide coverage analysis and stuff for a few locations. They do have some properties up there. This was with the previous administration for the council, and at the time then, my understanding was they might like to ask some questions and get some information from us, but it seemed more like a project that they wanted to do on their own, that it would be, they would obviously keep control of the property, but also potentially be the tower owners. And so we might consult with them was the take that I got from it. Since Mike left and there's been some turnover in the administration, I have not heard if they're still intending to move forward with that project. But we would obviously still be happy to help. We would benefit from the coverage, the ambulance services, and our deputies that run that area. Be happy to see that happen. AT&T at Gunflint. Again, our last update we provided was that there was new interest post-land exchange and that they had done a site visit and a site survey was completed. So since then, there's agreement that the existing tower is unable to support a new carrier, but confirmation in the form of a structural analysis is required. That's part of the new tower ordinance. So AT&T will need to run that and prove it, but we expect that to be the case. Like I mentioned at Grand Portage, the proposal that we currently have would be a rent abatement proposal resulting in the county owning the new tower, and again, dictating the specs so that should additional carriers want to provide coverage in that area, there would be a tower existing capable of holding the other providers.
So this isn't a second tower, this is replacing the current tower to make it structurally sound.
This would be a second tower. This would be a second tower. The reason being, part of the issue with the first tower is not just the loading, the structural capabilities, but the actual space available. There are so many tenants that there just isn't enough vertical real estate.
And it'll be, we have enough land area to put it close by?
We do. And we actually have a tentative location that we worked with the GIS department to confirm that it meets the setback requirements we have. They have construction drawings for the ground, but where the negotiation needs to continue to happen is on the specs of the tower. We want to see a structural analysis that shows holding a minimum of 3 full carrier loads with some headroom and a few other things.
And then that would come through county planning and zoning with a public hearing?
That would come through planning and zoning because that's a communication tower district.
I believe that is administrative,
I can double check.
but I would, yeah.
Thank you.
Again, at that site, lease language is going back and forth, environmental assessment is underway, and I know, talking to the folks at True North, they've been up there looking at providing required backhaul, and looks to be in place. So this is one that potentially, logistically, wouldn't be very hard to complete. The last one that I have here is Mid-Trail. That's T-Mobile at Mid-Trail, and there's been no change in that one, so we're still looking at hopefully executing that lease early this year, 2020, and potentially a 2020 construction build-out. That concludes the cell service updates that I have. Moving on to the Armor MnDOT projects, we have Mitt Lake is the last remaining full armor tower site to be built in Cook County. No change since September. Still looking forward to a 2020 build out and that being complete. The next project that we have, or that's a significant change to the public safety infrastructure, is microwave redundancy. This is a larger project that will result in redundant paths for multiple tower sites that we have in Cook County that don't currently have them now. So this would be Mid-Trail, Hovland, Devilfish, and Mount Maud would all get a redundant path. And when I say that, it's a redundant microwave path, and those microwave paths are required for those towers to function. So the risk without having the redundant path is that you have a failure at one site and you get a dominoes effect. So you lose the following sites down the line. So obviously providing a layer of redundancy will minimize impact and increase resiliency for the armor system. One added or additional benefit of this project is that it's going to remove loading from the Bogus Lake Tower. Bogus Lake Tower is one of our older towers. Through the regular operational work that we do on tower inspections, we know that tower does no longer pass a structural analysis with the new standards, and obviously reducing loading on a tower that's overloaded per the new standard is a good mitigating step to take before we can replace that tower. Lastly, I have the outdoor BDAs, the bidirectional amplifiers. At the Colville BDA, when I was here in September, at that point we had the conditional use permit was granted locally from the county. We also had approval from the Regional Emergency Communications Board and their advisory committee. That's a requirement through the Armor governance structure, through the statewide governance structure. Since then, we've secured approval from the statewide operations and technical committee and the statewide emergency communications board, who has ultimate authority over Armor system, the Armor infrastructure. Going forward, the last piece will be to work on funding strategies, and I plan to work on those strategies with our local 911 communications committee and ultimately bring a recommendation back to the board based on that conversation, the recommendation from that 911 communication committee. At Tofty, the Tofty Outdoor BDA, we're still working with MnDOT legal for approval of use of the property. This will also need to go through the regional and statewide governance structure. But I anticipate, since it's very similar, the same vendor, that it'll go very quickly through there once that's done. But we can't actually submit it for request until we have local approval to use it from the property owner, which in this case is MnDOT. That will conclude my report, and I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Rowan, for all you do. A lot of stuff.
Good info, thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Dukert?
AT&T is FirstNet?
Yes. Yes. Or FirstNet is AT&T, rather. Right.
Either way, so they are coming up on their 5-year deadline, and they're not looking at Mid-Trail? Or you can't answer that?
They have not approached us.
Okay.
through the Northeast region, I was appointed by the region to sit on the State Wireless Broadband Committee. And that committee works closely with FirstNet, the FirstNet Authority, and the state contract, the opt-in contract that sets those deadlines. They have requirements for coverage.
Yep.
But what they won't do is tip their hat as to where those coverages are going to be. So they say that steals a competitive edge from them. I'm not sure if they're concerned about their competitors trying to beat them to the punch or what exactly that is, but AT&T/FirstNet claims that that's part of the secret sauce, and they won't really tell you the sites that they're targeting until they're really ready to go.
And is their coverage, what's the percentage of coverage they need to have?
Well, that's, they have, I don't know exactly what it is for the 5th year.
Okay.
They have financial incentives and penalties
Right.
for meeting those at a statewide level.
Yep.
What the Wireless Broadband Committee is working to do and hoping to get them to sign off on, not just AT&T and FirstNet, but all wireless broadband providers, is to sign off on a set of requirements that would include 95% county-by-county coverage, similar as to what Armor was done.
Right, and we know what they need to do to cover that.
Right.
Because
And they
we've
would
been through that for 10 years
Yep.
now.
And so that's not something they've been signed off on. I think at this point, we're potentially looking at the scenario where we were with the Armor system when it was built out, and that, you know, we could see less coverage here than in some of the other areas. But they know that they being FirstNet knows that there's a huge push and demand for coverage in rural areas.
Yep.
And the Wireless Broadband Committee that reports to the State Emergency Communications Board is working hard to push them to sign off on those requirements.
Because we're maxed out at Mid-Trail with T-Mobile, right?
That's correct. T-Mobile will need to modify that tower structurally, and they had to significantly reduce the amount of loading that they wanted to put on that tower at that. In addition to that, we're having to modify that tower with MnDOT as part of the redundancy, microwave redundancy plan that I mentioned earlier. So that tower will quickly reach a point where it's at structural capacity. That tower is less loaded, and there is more vertical space there, and so a potential scenario where a stronger tower is built, accommodating and moving everyone over, a replacement, like you had mentioned before with Gunflint's, much more likely of an option for that site.
In the same spot?
Yes, it would be on the same property.
On the same property,
Yeah,
because
same
you'd have to redo the foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Gosh, I'm so glad I know so much about this. Thanks, Rowan.
Anything else? Thank you again, Roland, for all you do. I'm sorry, Bill, but we're going to take a 4-minute break.
Dave, 4 minutes. Run.
Go. Right behind you.
I know you are. Would you like to jump on? I got time to jump.
Well, Bobby, I drove up to your neck door this last week.
Yeah.
Had to wait for Pat to get done with a bunch of stuff and was kind of stuck in town. Just drove up your way, stopped at the casino.
I thought I seen your truck down there.
Yeah, turned $50 into, well, nothing. That went well. We should just hang out at Guys did a nice job of that facility.
To come up with something that's mutually agreeable, because Tom Bob said the county has to.
Well, I hadn't been around cigarette smoke in a while.
First time we can do anything right.
I mean, you do a good job of mitigating it, but boy, every once in a while you get a whiff and you think,
So that's why.
I should maybe buy a pack of heaters and start smoking
It'd
again.
be a work session.
You don't have to if you go there.
But we'd have to notice it as a special meeting.
Is the dog sled race ending up there?
Yeah, should be coming in tonight.
Good. That first time they've ever done that?
They did last year.
Well, we need to use the I-500 snowmobile race. I went to a snowmobile museum in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and looked at the Massey Ferguson that one guy rode to victory. And I can't imagine riding that 50 miles, let alone 500 miles.
Did you go over to Rapid River?
I went to the one in UP,
Yeah, it's over in Rapid River, over north of Escanaba. Yeah.
Very cool place.
I drove by there a few times. I've never been able to stop yet. One of these days I'm gonna.
Open year round.
Yeah.
I went to Flint, Michigan, I stopped. and They do a very nice job. It's just
We
a
have to
little
consider that
community
it
thing.
impacts on the entire
They
county.
have some real
That's what we're gonna do.
historical
And
items in there.
if it
Yeah.
views in favor of that.
Yeah, I don't know if they own them or just display them for people, but good hours, 7 days a week.
It's kind of like.
Did you load the other one?
It's kind of like the Uper store in Nagani's.
Yeah.
Hi, Molly.
Hi.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Morning, Molly.
Sorry, couple hours late.
It's understandable. I explained that you were out of town business, got delayed.
Happy you're here.
Yes. Sorry, I missed a lively discussion.
Are you?
Well, you can watch it.
Don't be sorry. We did
It'd be good that you do watch it.
put together a committee to look at the,
What
to
about
look at the
emergency
resolution.
preparedness? Is that- is
I
that
think
good
that's a
one?
good idea.
Is there a
I
time?
understand that you're setting a
4 minutes up.
meeting for Friday,
Lena's going to send out a,
special, or a notice for.
Yeah.
Hospital.
I think I'll have to do a memo.
Okay,
for that
well-
meeting because I have a family trip planned.
You're waiting for Bill.
I'm happy to put together. There's a lot of comments already, but they've just been shared with me. I'm not with the whole committee.
just some wording that needs to be made.
As Serena gets here, we'll...
Where's Bill? We need him.
Bill ran away.
He was here.
Well, thank you, Board. You're all here in 4 minutes.
We try to cooperate.
Some serious scanning going on out there. Bill almost made it.
Almost. Saw his arm.
Don't hold your breath.
Okay.
Just waiting for you, Bill.
We'll wait for you to come up, and then when Rena walks in, I guess you could start.
Yeah, we can start.
I guess we have good minutes on this, so we'll go
Good
through the
morning,
gravel
Mr.
pit.
Chair,
Morning.
And we will need a recommendation on action for this, so go ahead, Bill.
Thank you. At the January meeting of the Planning Commission, we had 4 items. 2 were review, or actually in the December meeting. Two were review items at the time. Also included in that was the gravel pit. So let's start with the gravel pits. We have 12 permitted gravel pits in Cook County. There's also a number of grandfathered pits. The 12 pits are adherent to conditions and that sort of thing. What we do in land services is every year we will go out and visit the sites, make sure that environmentally they're in good shape and they're not doing any damage to the watersheds, wetlands, that sort of thing. In the past, we've had some reviews which have resulted in bad reviews, if you will. And actually, a couple years ago, we had one that actually resulted in the revocation of a permit.
since that time, the pit owners have been really good about following conditions. The exception a couple of years, last year actually, 2018, we had a pit that was outside of the conditions. We issued a cease and desist, brought the pit back into permitting conditions, and this year it was a good operation. Of the 12 pits, 2 are not in operation, but they still retain their conditional use permitting allowance. The other pits were all found to be compliant. We have 2 pits that are positioning themselves for amendments to their conditional use permit this summer. The Laboda pit and the Matheson pit, so those will be back on your agenda at some point in the immediate future. Given the fairly innocuous review, the Planning Commission recommended approval of all the reviews moving forward into the 2020 construction year.
Okay,
Questions, comments? Okay.
done good.
Have a motion to take action on that?
So moved.
Okay, have a motion?
Support.
Support, okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Passes. Bill?
Thank you, thank
Okay.
you. The next review would be the Christine Day, Elisa Logan permit, which is for an interim use permit.
Excuse me, are you going to take that before
Oh, is it,
Sharon and Steve?
okay, Sharon and
Let's
Steve
follow that,
Frickman,
please.
I
Thank you.
apologize.
No, it's all right.
I should have updated my
We'll just follow
recall on
the
that.
agenda.
So yes, again, Sharon and Steve Frickman received a interim use permit for a home business operation in the FAR 3 zone district off of Cook County Road 44. They have an art gallery which is very, very intimately involved with the Visit Cook County and that sort of thing. And there's art activities that are occurring. The fall art tour is a huge component of that. The issue in the interim use permit initially was whether or not that would conflict with the residential landscape. And so in allowing the permit, we performed a review last year, found that there were no conflicts. This year kind of echoed the 2018 review, which was that there is activity there, and in fact, Steve and Sharon reported over 400 visitors this year. But in the course of a summer, it wasn't deemed as impacting either the aesthetic or the livability of the neighborhood. Now, ultimately, the complaint was based on a single landowner, which was kind of echoing what happened with the original application. We found, the Planning Commission found, Land Services found in looking at the review, that they're meeting the constraints of their permit. They communicated with the Highway Department. The Highway Department came out and graded the road an extra time this summer to address some of the activities, impacts from vehicular traffic and that sort of thing. More signs were put up to identify children in the area and things like that. So the predominant opinion was that this is not a bad fit in the area, and the Planning Commission voted to approve the review. They are on their second year of a 3-year permit, so moving forward, they asked for your approval to allow them to continue into 2020 with a 2020 end-of-the-year review similar to what we've conducted today.
Okay, any questions, comments? Commissioner Cook?
Did the Frickmans pay for the additional grading and the signage?
I don't believe so, no.
And was there an environmental impact study done on the area for the additional 400 cars of traffic?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Mills?
One, I believe one of the concerns of one of my constituents is that it's not clear what defines a home business versus a commercial operation, and you know, my understanding is a home business is just a part of a commercial, is a subset of commercial operations. But I think it might be worth looking at the planning commission, just around those definitions. That's my only comment, or if you have, yeah.
If I could address that, Commissioner Mills, our ordinance does have two categories. One is a home occupation, one is a home business. Home occupation is utilizing existing infrastructure to conduct an activity that is business-related or business-focused, which otherwise doesn't employ anyone from outside. It's kind of a family-run business. A home business such as the Frickmans and the next day Logan request has specific activities or building uses which are focused on the business. So even though the home business definition doesn't expand on that, whenever we see a commercial application, advertisement, connections to agencies that are bringing in more people specific to the request, then we kind of automatically kick it into the home business operation. And the reason why we do that is because we have a kind of a foundation for looking at what the operation is going to be, but also what are the impacts on the neighborhood. The conditions are represented to prohibit any undue use or undue disturbance. And so they are really, we do have complaints, but within our scope, the complaints are readily addressed by the conditions. And in this case, I think there's maybe some animosity there. I'm not going to get into the specifics of it, but the opposition has been the same. The support has been the same. So we're kind of in this homeostasis of it's not impacting and it's not veering from the conditions of the permit. And in that case, Planning Commission really has no alternative but to approve the review. If we see undue stress to the neighborhood or the environment, we would intercede and bring that out in the review process.
And you live on that road, what's the impact to you?
No impact to me. Appreciate the additional grading. And the signage, for that matter. I appreciate that as well.
So you got a benefit.
Yeah.
That's true.
Just a point of clarification. And I have more concerns about the next one than this one because it's not in my district and I haven't looked at it, but I'll comment again. But I appreciate what you say. I think we as commissioners, as elected officials, it's sort of, someone said this that's a lot smarter than I am, and they said, as an elected official, you should always try to do the right thing. And for managers and people in your positions or commissions, it's to do it right. And so that's why we have this process where you go through your, rationale and whatever process you follow. But we as commissioners still have that, vote or concern that we can say, this just isn't right. So my question is, if this goes forward through, I think you said a 3-year process, then that creates another decision, triggers another, where it becomes permanent?
No.
What is the 3-year? Please explain that.
This is a great question, Commissioner Bursheim, and the issue is that we established a interim use permit to this use. It's the same as a conditional use permit, but it has a time constraint attached to it. And you'll see, if you look back historically, there are a lot of conditional use permits in Cook County which have been vacated and no longer used, which theoretically could be invoked by a new property owner because the conditional use permit goes with the property and doesn't expire. The interim use permit allows us to invoke the review process. And that's critical in a neighborhood mosaic where there's a lot of residences and other residential infrastructure, to make sure that the activity, which is readily defined in the ordinance as a conditional use, is meeting the threshold of fitting within the the ordinance and residential constraints. So the interim use permit, we established a 3-year window for the Frickmans, and within that constraint, they have to demonstrate all the conditions are being adhered to and that sort of thing. The permit will expire after 3 years, and then they have to come in, and they, at that point, have the right to either come in for an additional interim use permit and maybe a 5 or a 10-year window of allowance, or a conditional use permit, which would go with the property. We would recommend that the interim use permit be the choice in that process, because it does give a little flexibility for the neighborhood. There won't be, if the Frickmans sell, that use will effectively end, and we won't have to deal with the reviews and that sort of thing.
So, I'm sorry, but you're educating me. So, 3 years of interim use permit. So that doesn't get you to it gets you to the consideration of a conditional use permit.
There would be a recommendation after the 2021 lapse of the permit from the Planning Commission to that the applicants have met the threshold of their interim use permit, and we encourage them to apply for an additional permit. We've communicated this with the Frickmans.
But would that trigger the possibility to go to conditional use?
That would be the property owner's choice.
Yes.
If they want to do a conditional use permit, the last item on the agenda today, Scott Smith, is a great example of that.
Okay.
If they want to choose to do a conditional use permit, they could. Our sage advice would be to kind of look at the duration of ownership, the intent of, perhaps passing on the property, that sort of thing, and using that as the logic of their decision.
But the Planning Commission would have the option to say, we're not ready for a conditional permit at the end of 3 years, and we would allow you another.
Yeah, it's really the recommendation that we bring in as land services it provides more guidance. For instance, the logic that I just introduced about conditional versus interim use permits is what we convey to the property owner / applicant. So the Planning Commission can come in and say, yes, we recommend this. They can change a conditional use permit into an interim use permit. They can also change an interim use permit into a conditional use permit, given it meets the constraints of the ordinance.
And it would come to the board again.
It would come to the board as
Thank
such.
you,
Yep.
thank you. Maybe others are interested in that too.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Any questions, comments about this one with Sharon and Steve Frickman? I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
Support. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes.
Thank you. The next one is Alyssa Logan and Christine Day. They have an interim use permit for a home business operation in the R1 Single Family Residential Zone District. Their operation is based on a meditation retreat center, which is done on weekends during the summer. Very, very contentious in the approval and the review establishment and things like that. There is some neighborhood objection to the use. And so the interim use permit that they were given was a 1-year permit. And in order to go forward with an additional interim use permit or conditional use permit, whichever their choice is, they had to pass the review. So the review was, okay, how many people were there? They had 148 visitors to their property over 6 weekends. There was an established 8 to 4 hours of operation, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. hours of operation. They had to have septic compliance. They had to establish a survey line. One of the issues with the neighbor was trespass. And so they established a survey line which actually showed that the trespass area was not on the neighbor's property, it was on Ms. Day's and Ms. Logan's property, so that resolved that. parking, things like that. So these are all factors that were introduced into the review. And at the review, the people who opposed the original permit were the people who remained opposed to the initial permit. The people supporting the permit were the same people. So we aren't getting a groundswell of opposition. Yes, we had some complaints. Yes, the sheriff was notified on one weekend, but those complaints basically went away, and we ended up with kind of an equilibrium between use by the permit owners and the impacts to the neighborhood and the adjacent property owners. So the impacts were chanting, drumming, a lot of noise, parking, things like that. Some of these were refuted by the applicants. The planning commission weighed these pretty closely because of the fact that this isn't just a permit being granted by the county. It could have the opportunity or the ability to interfere with other taxpayers' lives. And so what happened is that there was some lengthy discussion, and in conclusion, it came out that this was an operation, a home business operation that fell within the constraints of the conditions, and the Planning Commission approved the review, and Ms. Day and Ms. Logan are coming in March for a new permit application. The good thing about that is that the new process will allow any deficiencies in their operation or any other constraints that need to be identified, and we can invoke those into the new permit should it go forward and be approved.
Okay. Any questions, comments on that one?
Motion to approve.
Excuse me.
So we're just approving the review?
Correct, yes.
And that's it?
That's it. Their permit is officially lapsed at this point.
So point of clarification, what are you asking for?
We are asking for approval of the Planning Commission review for 2019 operations.
So you're not asking for an interim use permit?
Nope. Okay. You will in...
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Okay, I'd just like to comment again that...
Point of order. We need a
Excuse me.
second to continue discussion.
Second.
Okay. I wanted to acknowledge Commissioner Dushaw and make a comment, but... Okay, now we'll have discussion. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Yeah, I think it's, from my point of view, I oppose this just because I thought it was inappropriate to the neighborhood after I made a site visit. And I'm certainly not against the activity at all. I've been involved in chanting and drumming, but it was on a 300-acre farm in Wisconsin. But I just don't feel it's appropriate for that. But I understand what you're asking for, so I could support this for a review. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and no more discussion. All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
Thank you. The final item on the agenda today is what started out as an interim use permit request by Scott Smith to establish a duplex on his residential property adjacent to Devil Track Lake. This is in the LSR zone district, a vacation rental home, duplex. All those residential derivatives are identified as conditional use permits. Scott started out in December with this as a multi-residence unit, and it wasn't a congruous fit. So we moved it, we delayed it, worked with him to identify it as a duplex, which is precisely what it is. He has separated off his residence to have two livable units in that residence. There was some concern about short-term versus long-term rental. Since he reapplied and went to the Planning Commission, he has entered into a one-year-long lease with a newly married couple, so it is a long-term operation. The issue between interim, we wanted this as an interim use, again, so we can kind of stop that just allowed use between ownership changes and things like that. Scott wanted this as a conditional use because it is specifically identified as a conditional use in the ordinance. And there was some discussion, it wasn't a prolonged discussion, but the Planning Commission agreed with that. And we saw that, in fact, it isn't going to interfere because of the fact the infrastructure, the residence has been altered specifically to accommodate the duplex configuration, and that was deemed as reason that this is probably going to go with the property from here on out, making it a conditional use. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to approve the request. Conditions were pretty consistent with other multi-residential units, parking space, things like that. Unanimous approval with the recommendation that the Board of Commissioners also approve this, and this would need a resolution, and you got that template.
Okay, any questions, comments? Commissioner Mills?
So this is a conversion of his current structure to a duplex, or?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then there were concerns from neighbors, but then from reading the packet, it sounded like those were resolved?
Those were resolved at the meeting, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, but,
That's- Chairman, that's what I had to reread a couple of times because I was kind of, okay, he wanted a vacation. No, he didn't want to. No, now he wants to have a duplex. So I had to read this a couple of times to understand what we were being asked.
okay. Any other questions, comments? Commissioner
It wasn't a
Dukert?
vacation rental, and the neighbors thought it was. So that was the confusion.
Yeah.
And did he need a conditional use for vacation rental, or vacation rental would have just been permitted?
No, it would have been a permitted use.
Yeah, so he-
And just the little end around on this is that with the duplex and approval of the duplex, vacation rental home is still at his disposal, but the long-term rental really kind of lessens that. They're going to be there for a year, possibly longer, and that's good for everybody involved.
Okay. Entertain a motion to?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Bill,
very
for dealing with all the verities and variables and the technical issues for what you do.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay, Auditor, we'll go to Heart of the Continent first before we get to A on the airport grant. There was a handout on that?
I think I handed that out. That's, it's a long letter, but it's actually annual dues that they're requesting. We've paid those dues for a number of years. It's in the budget at $250. That's the rate the board has chosen to, based upon our population, I think. So, question would be, a motion to approve paying those dues for 2020.
Okay, so the question is, from the auditor, is the level of funding, is that what you're, or are we going to continue with the past funding?
And to pay it. So I'm just telling you what the past funding has been, and what's in the budget is $250, so.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Mills?
Commissioner Dukert and Commissioner DeShaw, you've been involved in this somewhat in the past, and, but this year no? Oh, well, this year, we're not having representation there, correct?
I haven't been able to make it for 2 years.
Okay.
Excuse me,
it was-
clarification that I did attend one session.
I'm sorry,
And then I never got notice of any others, but I did go as alternate. And I attended one meeting about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I don't know what's happened there, but.
And we used to have, our emergency manager went, and that also hasn't happened in many years.
I guess, excuse me, I guess what I'm looking for is some feedback about our partnership in this, and it seems like a small cost, but it seems like there's good cause, so that's where I'm looking for.
Commissioner DeShaw?
Do we donate anything else like this?
Dues, not donate.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, I think it's support, yeah. Yes, I'm sure we do. But from my understanding, and I only go back 3 years, is that this has been approved in our organizational meeting. And that's when we set in motion, what we're affiliating with or supporting. So it's been there for the last 3 years that I'm aware of, unless I stand corrected.
But if we don't have anybody attending it, you volunteering?
No, I'm just agreeing with Commissioner DeShaw. There are many committees and dues that we have agreed to in the past that we have eliminated when they no longer serve us. We've dropped out of MRCC, we've dropped out of the one you were on last year. It's not uncommon for us to drop out of something, whether it's in the budget or not. So if there's concerns or questions, I mean, we could table it until we get more information on it. I don't know.
Well, if nobody's going to be attending it, what's the point of?
I guess as alternate, all I can say is that I went to one when I was notified, and so I don't know what the issue with that, but I would have attempted to go if I could. But sometimes the meetings are in Ontario, and I think it's very worthwhile to support, just because it involves Grand Portage, it involves Cook County, and it's a tourism thing that does advertise. They have a map that's sent out nationally and internationally to support tourism along the North Shore from Duluth to Thunder Bay, as well as the Quetico and Boundary Waters.
Whoa, there's a map going out internationally supporting people coming here? That's kind of scary. But it's cheap for $250.
Yeah, so I think that alone would justify it. Commissioner Mills, anything else, Commissioner Gershon?
Not at this moment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
So not at this moment.
Okay. So, Commissioner Mills?
So yeah, I have not attended one, and I'm not all that familiar. I have been getting invites for various events they've had, but just reading public-private partnerships that include stakeholders from government, private industry, tourism, local economies, nonprofit clubs and organizations, and leveraging funds and marketing. It seems like it's in line with what our values and goals are, and so I would be in favor of continuing our membership, and I am open to sending representation. It's just that, not knowing anything about it in our organizational meeting, I was fine not having representation too. So.
Okay, so are we ready for a motion?
I'll move that we pay the dues to be a member of this organization.
So that would be the $250.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Support.
Okay, support. Any more discussion?
I know they had a Commissioner Jules on that from St. Louis County, and they brought a group up to Grand Portage to bike, and 3 people went on the ride.
Oh, okay. Well.
Wasn't that also the same day as our district meeting?
No.
Okay.
I think the weather was bad.
Yeah, I never know, but it was, at least someone showed up, but, okay, any other discussion? All those, ready? I'm sorry. Dave? Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. Continue on with the closeout of airport grant for the arrival departure building.
Mr. Chair, yes, so this is a little overdue. I think we've had a lot of projects in the hopper, so this project was, I think, mostly completed by 2017, but the closeout is finally here. And in that closeout, originally this was proposed, and then it determined that there weren't enough entitlement funds to cover the normal 90%, just for some background. But the commission decided to go forward with knowing that they had an application into IRRB, which came through with $200,000 that supported our local funding, kept our costs lower, and this final closeout also there's a possibility of now a 15% additional grant. We don't have that yet. We expect to get that as part of their review and final closeout. So that's just background, but we need to approve the closeout in any case. So, and ask for any questions and then approval.
Questions or comments? Okay, for, someone like to make a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve the closeout of the grant.
Okay.
Support.
Support. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Short form closeout for CK.
So the second grant, this is the environmental assessment. This is the area of the runway extension that was missed originally and caused the issue that we've been facing. So during that process, we had to go back and do this environmental analysis. It's a very small grant. It was for $67,500 for $75,000 of cost to do that area around the runway where the obstructions had to be removed, the trees, etc. So in this case, when you approve the closeout, there's an additional 20-some thousand that will come back to us.
Okay, so discussion. Entertain a motion to close out the grant and authorize the Auditor-Treasurer to sign.
So moved.
Okay.
Support.
Support. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
And thank you. Passes. Voting equipment grant application.
So back in 2016, actually 2006, there was some voting equipment grant, in which case we changed our equipment to the N100s, and then most recently, there was a $7 million grant, and we upgraded to the DS200s, and now the state is offering another $2 million statewide, and we could use an additional DS200 to speed up our process at the end of the night. And two other items were these polling units that we could use in Grand Marais in the two polling places to improve those operations rather than the physical printout pages that we use right now for polling places. So those polling items are 75% covered, and the DS200 is 50% covered, and would ask approval of this grant application.
Okay, Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did you say 15 or 50?
50% for the DS200 and 75% for the polling equipment.
Okay, entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Okay, support?
Support.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Changes to the Nescoda revolving loan agreement.
This is we approved this application a couple of years ago for Nescoda and his partner. His partner's name is Nick, and what's in the agenda here is Nate. That's his brother, so that's a mistake. I'll correct that, so it will go in the minutes correctly and on the board. So his brother owns the Crooked Spoon. He's not involved with this. So the business has changed a little bit. It's expanding, and Nick would like they decided to part ways. And he would like to be removed from the responsibility for this loan. So the committee met and approved that request. We discussed the future of the project and how Nescoda would be able to operate without his partner, and we were satisfied. The collateral is the same. It's the property in the business development park, and a piece of equipment, so the collateral would remain the same, and we would just have one individual securing this rather than two. And so that's the essence of it. So the recommendation is to terminate the loan agreement with Nick and with Nesgoda LLP in the amount of $52,505.87, which is their current loan. Release Nick Hingus from the personal guarantee. Approve a new loan agreement with Nesgoda LLC, which he's creating at the moment with his attorney. And require, the committee also wanted to get a copy by March 31st of the full financial reports, copy of the Articles of Incorporation of the original LLP, and a copy of the new LLC, Articles of Incorporation. And that's the essence of it. Molly reached out to a real estate attorney. This is unusual. We haven't done one quite like this before, just to make sure we're following all the best procedures. And there's going to be an O&E done on the property itself, which is how would you describe that? It's just it's a review to see if there's any other liens on the property and that sort of thing. So this would be subject to that final and then the final documentation.
Mr. Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are there restrictions, I'm just curious about the process with the revolving loan fund, and say the partnership was not changing, say that all that was changing was the business model. Are there reviews or restrictions within the revolving loan fund to kind of address those changes, or how does that work? Or
there's nothing specifically in our guidelines. It's possible that things like that happen that we're not aware of, but the security that we would have wouldn't change unless we approve that change.
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Mills, there in our kind of standard template loan agreement, the borrower does agree to keep their business entity intact, but also to use the funds issued by the revolving loan fund for the uses that they identify on their application. So in that way, there is kind of a restriction on that they keep the same type of business going. This one, well, we've agreed to amend or produce a new borrower agreement anyway, but it's my understanding that the business is expanding and still keeping its old form of operation as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, entertain a motion to...
I'm sorry, I have one other question. Would it be appropriate to approve this based on the financial reports and articles of incorporation? Just what the revolving loan, like keeping pending that? Is that the
last line?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I read it differently.
All right.
So moved.
Does that clarify? Okay.
Second.
And there was a second, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Any more discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Administrator capital project updates.
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we are moving along with the capital projects that we bonded for. I think, as you know, we had the open house for the warming house, which is turning out to be a great success. Lots of kids and families using that. We had, I think, a good showing with the press last weekend when Mr. Chairman and Kristen and I met Brian Larson at the paper and Joe Friedrichs from WTIP and walked them through the Hovland Public Works building and gave them a tour and talked to them about the advantages of having this facility for the county. And I think we got good stories about the condition of that building and how it will serve the county. So the last project now is the replacement of windows, which is going a little slower than anticipated. We've been, as they have been uninstalling the current windows, we found that the construction of the buildings created some challenges that they weren't anticipating. So worked through that at the Law Enforcement Center. There's a little bit of finishing work inside, which the vendor's taking care of, where they took out the windows and some sheetrock was damaged, and they'll finish that up. That one is mostly done. When we got over here to the courthouse, based on what happened at the Law Enforcement Center, I asked them to do 1 or 2 windows first to understand what the issues were before they did the issues all the way around, in case there were issues that they needed to come up with solutions for, and there were. The size of the windows that they removed took a bigger space than the size that they ordered. So the architect has proposed an idea to use a receptacle to make it fit in there better. And that everybody seems to think that's a good idea. I've asked them to come up. They're coming up on Thursday to show me how that will work so that we can look at it, Brian Silence can look at it, make sure it's a good solution before they order the material and move forward. I've been pretty clear that this is not something that the county is going to pay extra for, that this should have been considered in the bid. So, if this is a good solution and everybody thinks it'll work well, then they have to order the material for it. So there'll be a 2 to 3 week lapse. So during that time, our maintenance crew, who is going to be focused on this, will be over at the Y doing the kind of painting and cleanup post work that we did before, where we were getting a lot of corrosion in the locker rooms and mold because of the forced air out of there, and that issue is resolved. So now we can go back and do those repairs, and we'll do that in the next 2 to 3 weeks then, while we're waiting for this other thing to happen. So that's what I got.
Questions or comments for the administrator on this?
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you for all
Thank you.
the work on that. Employee concerns, commissioner concerns, commissioner reports, anything that commissioner would like to report on, raise your hand. And I have one. I think that might be pertinent to some of the previous work with the Ty Blotnick BWCA reappraisal, Attorney Hicken and interim Administrator Rogers and I and our assessor, myself and the assessor, had a meeting last week with commissioners, assessors, and attorneys, and I believe the Public Affairs Director for St. Louis County last week, and we sort of had a good discussion. Commissioner Svea is sort of the point person on this, and we were attempting to set up a meeting with Representative Stauber, as well as the Deputy Secretary of the United States Agriculture, Sensky, sometime that first week in March, and we're trying to focus on March 5th, I believe, for that, and we'll update on that. At the meeting, we discussed, we had a really productive meeting talking about how to proceed and some of the rationale and what we would like to have addressed. And there's also the question of trying to create some legislation, but you know, that's something that I think we could focus on later, depending upon what's happening here. But our immediate concern, and please correct me if I interpret something wrong here, that we would focus on the appraisal and how to go forward and deal with that. And there's possible ways to proceed, you could go back to the 2008 and do sort of an index thing and say, well, let's just build on this. Or we could have a new appraisal, which we would then want to make sure that we have different criteria that's been used, especially in the last appraisal. And it would be a new appraiser as well. And so those issues would be coming forward. And I think we're going to meet again now in February, this group, and what was asked of our assessors at that last meeting was to come forward with some kind of group consensus of the 3 counties on how this reappraisal would look and the criteria that would be in it and getting their input. It was also, I brought up the question at the meeting whether we should, for this group to go to Washington, D.C. Ask the question, in our situation, we have approval from 3 at a previous meeting. Should we include an assessor? And the consensus of the group that said no, we would want them to formulate some kind of, criteria that we would use, that they would agree on for all 3 counties, and that this should be mainly attorneys and commissioners. Commissioner Svei thought the ideal number from each county would be 2, and so that would be then our attorney and myself, just having worked on this. And so also knowing that if something else comes up, maybe Commissioner Starley could meet with us. I guess that's a down day, but that's not necessary because I know you're there on other business. But so that's pretty much a review. We'll meet again February 5th, as I mentioned, and we may meet another time as well if we feel it's necessary, and then we'll keep you updated. So any questions, comments? Yeah.
A concern I would have with having a different appraiser is that right now, it's a very strong argument for, wait a second, what's going on? It's the same appraiser. How is this value so different? And so if you get a different appraiser in there, then it's like, well, it's a different value. Well, it's a different appraiser.
Yeah.
I guess maybe part of it is looking for objectivity, but why a different appraiser?
Well, my understanding is this is complex, number one. And appraisers, and Mr. Thompson could add this, and please add on, is that they use this yellow book on appraisal methods, and there are other methods to do it. So I think to get into the complexity of this is that we are disagreeing with the basis of the appraisal, which is basically timber as a strong component. And our case is that the strongest one should be real estate value, especially Lakeshore. And we're appraised a little bit higher than the other counties in that regard. I think $700 an acre versus. And we're trying to make a case that no, that's not it. So if we rehired that appraiser, we'd more than likely be quite predictable that they would use the same methods. And so we're asking for other considerations in their method. And it gets really deep into processes for dealing with large land areas. The other criteria that they used is that they would say, well, who can buy this? And so that would be a large timber company. Our point being, and especially this was said by Commissioner Gudemont very strongly, that if we opened up this stuff on the real estate market, it would sell right away, and it'd sell very fast, lot by lot or broke by boat. Also, part of this new appraisal that we'll ask for is mineral rights, and that was not part of that initial one. So if we rehired the same appraiser, then I think the logic is, well, then we're not asking for a new appraisal. We can't tell them how to do it over again.
My question is, this same appraiser did the appraisal in 2008, and that was done with Lakeshore
And it was a company,
Recreation.
yeah. Mhm.
And so, my question is, why did it change back to timber versus in 2008, they had it as the real estate.
Part of that discussion was in regard to who would buy it. And so, as I mentioned, large lumber companies maybe would buy it. And that was a criteria he used in his appraisal.
In 2008?
Now.
Well, that's what I'm asking about 2008, because I think there's a breakdown in logic there. It's not making sense that the same appraisal company did 2008.
The appraisal company changed from 2008 to the last one.
Oh, see, that was not, okay.
Yes.
Members of the company,
Split.
people have left.
It's a different company, but the
So-
same appraiser.
Okay.
One
That's new
of the
information.
appraisers
Thank you.
is the same.
Thank you.
Others-
That's
Okay,
new
does that
information for
cover
me.
it?
Yep.
But it's a good question, and it's very complex, and that's why we're meeting again, and we spent 2 hours on it, and it's
Thank
very
you.
important that appraisers and our assessors, come into some kind of agreement, because that's what we're going to bring forward, and then we'll definitely lobby for that.
I guess I
So-
do have another question.
Sure.
So both Commissioner Svei and Commissioner Gudermont are on, or?
I don't know who's going to go from Lake County. I know that Commissioner Svei would be there, and I don't know, we didn't bring it up, but it could be another commissioner, or it could be the attorney.
I guess my question is about the meetings. We've just had one commissioner, and then they were having two there, is that?
Yes, yeah, but that was their choice. Yeah. Certainly, if another commissioner wants to go to the next meeting, you're certainly welcome to. I mean, as long as it's only two of us.
Right.
Mr. Chair, since I'm the backup, maybe you let me know about the next one.
Sure. Well, it's 10 o'clock on February 5th.
It is.
It's a Wednesday?
It's a Wednesday.
Next Wednesday. And where?
It's at the Lake County Highway
Highway
building
Department.
on Highway 2.
Okay.
10
so
o'clock.
You're certainly welcome. Yeah, that would be
10
good.
o'clock.
I thought you were going to attend the first one, but it was,
I didn't know about it.
oh.
Okay,
Yeah.
February 5th.
Thank you for being involved in that.
Sure. Sure. Okay, any other questions on that? I guess good questions. Any other reports, meeting, excuse me.
I
Mr.
just,
Mills?
I can't remember if I updated the board or not, that AOA has a new director.
Yes, you did.
Okay, Scott Sahart. Also, the CHB did hire a new director, and that's Susan Michaels, and she's out of Silver Bay. And she had been with the CHB before, and then went to the regional ship coordinator, and has worked with the state, has great experience, and then we're coming back to the CHB. So we're very excited about her hire. The library director search, we'll be doing interviews, I believe, Friday, and so that's moving along.
Thank you, Commissioner Dukert.
So this section says concerns, and I've got a few concerns. Today we had an opportunity to review a business in a residential area where the business owner clearly stated that they had 400 visitors. And we were also told that our highway department did additional grading, that we put up signs, that all of these expenses, and there was no questions. And the DNR wants to include our county on a map, and we're asking the DNR and the Forest Service to do an environmental review of people driving on public roads when we might possibly maybe have 200 additional visitors. And that bothers me, that we're not consistent in how we make decisions here. It's 18 miles of county road that we're looking at, most of it paved, and we're making all of these requests and requirements to other entities, and I just don't get it. I just can't follow it. I don't understand it. No one questioned. I was the only one that asked how much that cost us, how much that cost citizens to have additional grading done on a road. And there's no money coming back from that business owner. There's no question of the business owner, how much that benefits the county to have that money come back in. And it's infuriating and disappointing. That's my concern.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yeah, I think the only reason we're considering the border-to-border is we were asked by the DNR to do it.
And
to
again,
whether
we're
we
making
approve it.
requests to the DNR that we're not making to a business that has 400 people driving on a residential road. We know for a
Sure, your
fact.
point is well taken.
No, it's not, because you're just going to shut me down again, which is fine.
Commissioner Mills?
I'm sorry that you feel shut down.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm trying to find out as much information. I'm trying to make sure the board has as much information as we can. It seems very difficult to get the answers that we're looking for. I have not been impressed. Well, firstly, I haven't been involved in that process, and I haven't been impressed with how my understanding of the process. The reason I felt like the proposal before us today was something I could accept is it went through the Planning Commission and their process, and it's not clear that that additional traffic was the reason for the additional grading. I believe in our packet it did talk about some pretty wet conditions, and the scope I mean, even the scope of the DNR's project is unknown, you know.
Yeah.
I hear
They're
different
still-
numbers.
They're still in the process, and they had public meetings years ago and had input on the route, and I'm sorry that you weren't in office when that happened. And I think part of why we're not getting information might be because on the other end, they're like, we've already done this over and over and over again, and every time there's an election, they have to start all over. So I'm sorry. You're right, you're not getting a lot of information from them.
Okay, any other commissioner reports or concerns? Meeting update, we'll try to schedule a meeting, a work session with the board and others in regards to the issue that we talked about with tax classification. Meetings to note, AMC Legislative Conference on February 25th through February 27th. There will be a quorum. And then the NACO Legislative Conference is February 29th through March 4th, and Commissioner Storley will be attending that. And the Transportation Alliance Day at the Capitol is on March 18th in St. Paul. Is anyone going to that? Bob?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you for doing that. So then we have some correspondence memos. Did you want to make any comments about the final language of Section 1 and 2? Attorney Hicken?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just asking commissioners to review it and make sure that it's consistent with what you remember from our discussion.
All right, with that, I guess we got some packets, and if there's nothing else for business, we'll adjourn. I'll have a motion, please, to do so.
So moved.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, Ella.